Hello, everyone. Welcome back for another week of Growing with My Fellow Growers. I'm your host, Jack Greenstock, joined as always by an amazing panel. I'm going to pass it over first this week, as I often do, to Spartan Grown.
Thanks, Jack. I am Spartan Grown. You can find me on Instagram at Spartan Grown, all one word, no spaces, or you can shoot me an email at spartangrown@gmail.com or russ@gmlarmy.com, where I can help you with all of your growing and lighting questions.
Happy to have you back, and I'm going to pass it over next
Good to be back.
to Matthew Gates.
Yeah, hey everyone, this is Matthew Gates. You guys know who it is, IPM specialist. I've been super busy lately. I've been traveling to like Arizona. I was on a few other podcasts, including the High podcast, and I'm prepping for one in Austin, Texas, the PhotoX conference by Fluence. So that'll be interesting as well.
Good stuff. They've got a lot of good research and pretty good lights in my experience from what I've seen so far. So cool that you're working with good people, good groups, and getting to do some travel. I know it has been hot here in California and probably in Arizona where you were
Oh
at.
God, yes.
You're back in San Diego now. I'm sure you're experiencing some of this heat.
I think you saw my post on Instagram, right? The Gauntlet Dart Legacy reference. You
I
are
did not
now
see that
entering
one.
the Valley of. Oh, well, maybe you didn't. Somebody else was commenting. That was a friend of mine. Maybe I mixed you guys up. But yeah, it was hot. Actually, I went to
That's
Arizona in
hilarious.
May. Well, here you can laugh at me this way. I went to Arizona like back in May, and my car had no AC, which is fine. It's always been fine for me. It actually worked for a while, and then it stopped working a little bit ago, and I didn't need it. But then when I went through to Phoenix and Tucson, it wasn't so bad. When I went to go there in July, it was like a traumatic experience, though, and I should know better. But the air, I hadn't, I had been confronted with it in a while, so I stopped. So I stopped respecting the desert, the way that it, as they say, it wicks the moisture like out of your body, right? The hot air is just like that. So it's not like a humid thing, right? It just sucks it out of you. And so I was having trouble. Um,
We're having that humidity here right now. I feel like we're in Florida. It was 101 at one of the spots I went today. It's been high 80s or 90s, which is atypical for coastal San
super.
Diego. So it is
Yeah,
very hot.
it's humid right
Most
now.
people don't have AC.
It feels like nighttime Arizona when I was there. Like when it gets cool, it feels like this. And it's a little bit humid sometimes because everyone's like spraying sprinklers and stuff, which maybe they shouldn't be. But also the heat that radiates off of the asphalt and the cement, like you walk out and maybe you don't have like the photons smashing you in the face, but you still have that like radiation still coming up. It's
You
not
can see
fun.
a mirage coming off of hot
Yeah.
asphalt a lot of the times on a hot day. It's not a fun experience. Arizona, Florida, San Diego, even Ohio, Michigan in your summers during the hot of the hot, you understand it can be brutal. Speaking of all these beautiful places in America that do get hot, we got the American one joining us with the hot fire on the mute button.
Oops, sorry, yeah, the mute button. What's up, everybody? I'm the American One on YouTube and the American One underscore with underscore Keens on the IG. It's good to see you, Jack, and panel, and everyone in chat. I'm glad I made it tonight, and yeah, look forward to it.
Glad you made it as well. I did mention before the show, I believe he's a Michigander, but I want to give a shout out and RIP to Mr. Tight. He was a great cannabis educator, one of the early in the cannabis YouTube space, I would say. Skillbo One used to shout him out, so that was what made me get into some of Mr. Tight's stuff. And I think he had something called Empire Breeding Co. And I believe that I even featured him in 50 Strains of Green. So shout out to Mr. Tight, RIP, and just a lot of great work from the breeding as well as the education stuff, and kind of an early pioneer. And yeah, really respect the people that were putting it out there so early, and a lot of really good knowledge. Not to say that everything anybody says is always correct, but it's I think they were a lot more correct than not correct in what I saw from their teachings. And shout out to Skillbo for getting me into them. I hope Skillbo's doing well. I haven't seen or heard from Skillbo for a little while, but cheers to Skillbo. And yeah, I just want to maybe pass that around and ask if maybe Spartan or Tau or anybody's grown any of their gear in the chat, you can shout it out. And if you learned anything from Tight, just maybe show some love. And shout out that, good education that you got.
Yeah, shout out to Mr. Tight. He had tons of good. He was a pioneer, one of the pioneers in the early YouTube weed game, before YouTube, it was for me, it was Jorge Cervantes VHS, all disguised, and then it was the guy all painted all green. And then it was for me, it was Mr. Tight and Empire Breed. So Empire Breeding, that makes me think New York more than Michigan, but maybe he was from Michigan. I know he was in tight with the Med Grower, and he's from Michigan. And but yeah, Mr. Tight will be sorely missed. And not only was he a good breeder, but he bred for what I consider for the people, right? He didn't have prices that were outrageous. They were within reach for the average grower. So I really liked that.
I think you might be right about the Empire because like the Empire State and things like that. But most of the people that I heard about him through were from the Michigan community, but the Michiganja out there, y'all are always up on the newest dankest, whether it's from California or New York or Florida. Seems like Michigan always seems to get their hands on it and start growing it and growing it well. So shout out to all the great people in Michigan and New York and everywhere else growing that dank and doing their best to grow the fire and spread it around. One of the topics that I kind of threw out there on the headline, unless Tao, did you have any thoughts or experiences about Mr. Tight?
No, unfortunately, I didn't have any interactions with him, but it's always sad to see news like that. And yeah, I would say if anybody has his gear, man, dig some out and start it up. I hope that's what happens when my demise eventually occurs, however many centuries in the future it may be.
So yeah, definitely many centuries to go for Tao, and not decades, centuries, folks. Tao is living forever. Cannabis cookies will make you age in reverse. But yeah, a lot of people out there seeing some love in the chat, and we're doing some Q&A tonight, as well as I kind of threw up the topic of why some growers quit and why maybe they shouldn't. It is easy to say, obviously, but it's one of those things that I've seen over the years. A lot of people that say, "Oh, I used to grow and I don't anymore for this or that reason." And maybe some of you guys have those similar experiences. It doesn't seem like yourselves necessarily, but other people that you are interacting with. And I'm curious if Spartan, if you've come across that experience where you're coming into contact with people that used to grow, but they're no longer growing for one reason or another. And maybe we could get into more of the why. And some people, maybe it is actually the only way for them. But I think a lot of the time there's alternatives that maybe they haven't explored yet, especially with new technology and costs coming down and things like that.
Absolutely. I want to shout out. I was on the Grandmaster level show last night, and late on the show, NV Closet Med Grower jumped on another old school. I consider another pioneer in the YouTube cannabis scene. He jumped on and he's not growing right now, so it's a perfect conversation. He hit like a 2 year hiatus. Life gets in the way sometimes, right? I think most growers will tell you, what's a vacation? How do I get away from my grow? And with automation, some other things you can get away from your grow, but still, it's almost like having a pet or some other kind of responsibility that kind of almost ties you to your house. So some people, it's just a matter of freedom. Like, I want to be able to go on vacation. I want to be able to do this or do that. And it's also a dedication thing, right? I think it's really, I think as rewarding as growing is, in itself, I think that it's also work. I think we can't really argue that. And the dedication that you need, I think the only thing that keeps people dedicated enough to continue to do that work every single day, day in, day out, is passion for the plant. And it may be, this is just me kind of in the guessing thing, but it may be if cannabis to you is just a recreational thing and it's not a medicinal thing where it's almost a need, then I can see where, under that standpoint, whether you're not growing for somebody that has the need or you don't have the need yourself, to not really have the drive to or that passion to want to continue the work because it really is work and you're adding that on top of whatever load you're already doing in your everyday thing. And most people are pretty busy and have another job. It's not like they support themselves with their growth. So yeah, I think it's kind of like the combination of those things. And so I don't feel like it's a cop out or any of those things. I understand why growing is not for everyone. That's why there's some things that other people do that I don't do that, it's everybody's got their own passions, everybody's got their own things. But when I do come into contact with those people, like you say, and they contact me, I always bring it up as much as I possibly can. Well, are you growing? Oh, you're not? Oh, well, why not? You know what I mean? And see if I can ignite, see if there's a flame there. If I can stoke that flame a little bit, get it going. Maybe I can get somebody else growing because I really do think that's the most important thing for cannabis, for the good of cannabis, is to get as many people home growing as possible.
I agree. I think a lot of the culture and community comes from that element. And one of the reasons I asked is I'm currently on a little hiatus and mainly, life and weather, actually. A lot of people, this is the first summer I've taken off since I moved into this place. I started growing like, you know, immediately and then for years never stopped. So I was doing the, 4 or 5, 6 grows per year. And it's definitely a grind. There's a lot of labor. It's laborious. And even if you love it and you do have passion, it takes time out of your day. And if you don't have that time, or if you get sick or injured, or take on more hours at work and things like that, it can be something that gets put on the back burner. But it's something that I, like you, will try and stoke the flame of friends and growers locally. One of being my former barber, I would just bring plants over to his house. Like, oh, I popped too many and these are females. Like, do you want these? Or they're a little too tall for my space, but you've got more room. So, and then he'd just start growing them out, and then I'd see him a few months later, and then he'd have a little sample for me. And there's always a, fun exchange to even my just a neighbor who'd never grown. I gave a few extra females that I had out to just neighbors in the neighborhood, and they just threw them outside, put them in pots, and nobody picked them. They only got to like one was like an auto flower almost, like it was like a arm football length high, just like
Nice.
a
One big
quarter
cola.
half ounce something like that. But it stank. It was like outdoor reeked. It was a velvet punch, but it was dark black and just beautiful gasoline kind of aroma with some sweet grape.
Hell
And
yeah.
they were just so impressed by the fact that they were able to just do it, throw it in some soil, give it some water, just like all their other plants. Like I just went to a plumeria festival. My wife and I got 2 new cuttings of plumeria, one called the lipstick. It's like a pink variety. And then another one, it's Nebel's rainbow, Neb instead of like Neville. I thought that was funny. I was like, Neville? And I was like, oh, Nebel. And it's like a lay variety. It's a rainbow plumeria. And it's funny, I was talking with some of these people, and the one guy was like, "Oh, I bought this one like last year and it didn't bloom." And I'm like, "Did you like up pot it or like did you do anything?" And gave him a little advice. I was like, "Maybe put in a little larger pot." And I told him about like earth boxes and city pickers and maybe using worm castings and how it's helped in just like 1 or 2 years. Like I've seen a couple plumerias I've worked with bloom, and it's funny, a lot of flowers have a similar need for well draining soil and good organic mix can get the job done a lot of the time. So it was always fun to interact with other passionate gardeners, whether it's cannabis or even in this case, the Plumeria Festival. There were so many different cuttings. I never even knew there was this many. I walk around here and there's a lot of people that grow them locally. So it was interesting to just actually get to go and see the hundreds of different varieties. I think there was 1,000+ plants on sale. So it's a good time. But I do have a few questions rolling in here. And I'm also
Here's a good
curious.
point, real quick. With I just want to jump in because it was still relating to the topic. Genetic Memory Farms, shout out to him. He's always got good comments, but I want to highlight this when he says, I think without an on-ramp, numbers of growers are dropping off. He means home growers, and will continue. Brew and Grow was our local chain store in Chicagoland, collapsed. Don't think it was just Amazon. And I think it's a combination of the local grow store, the one that's like not a chain store, that was the mom and pop. It was just around, since Prohibition time. Come in, and then the chain store comes in, buys them out, completely changes the atmosphere, and then they usually go out of business. And then there's no little local hub for growers to run into each other, or for them to get their equipment. Now they have to order it online. I think that's a great point. I think that's an extremely good point. Here where I live in Jackson, Michigan, we had 3 grow stores for the longest time. Now we have zero grow stores.
That's definitely a part of the community, especially like the local meetup. I guess Eagle says a lot of it's just like Walmart. He'll be there and like smoking joints or whatever, and he'll see somebody else that he knows just locally from growing or whatever and bump into him that way. But it's not the same as like everyone going to the specific spot for growing predominantly cannabis and for a long period of time. I mean, I met a few older ladies that were growing actual like tomatoes and stuff, but most of the people I met at the hydro store were actually growing cannabis. So um, it's interesting that so many of them have shut down and that local source is no longer maybe the on-ramp that it once was. And I do think that there's a lot of parallels to home brewing because very few people that drink brew their own. Um, so I think there's a good parallel because there's a lot of users and only so many people actually making it themselves. And I think if you talk to the home brewers, they would probably argue, just like many of us, hey, we make better beer. We can make it a higher quality, better taste, this and that. Whatever, stronger, weaker, whatever you like, they can do it up just like it in cannabis. So um, shout out to the home brewers and also, shout out to all the home growers who are still doing it because it is easy to quit. One of the things I was going to say that makes it easier to quit is that the costs have come down so much that it is hard to justify paying for that extra electrical, paying for the nutrients, paying for the extra soil and cocoa or whatever to re-amend. And it's time, effort, energy, all these things. If it even gets close to the point where it's like break even, a lot of people are going to be like, unless they have, like Spartan said, that passion, they're not going to push through and pay more. I think on the end where it's like, I'd even pay more even if like the commercial cost of it comes down and even like the good quality stuff is cheaper. I want to grow my own just because ultimately it's, and even like breeding my own, people aren't going to pick the strains that I want. There's other strains out there that might suit my needs, but I'm just a curious person. I've always been. I like
And
to
you have
try
control
stuff.
of the whole process, right? You don't have to question, you don't have to question one, did the grower, spray something terrible on it or have some kind of weird growing practice? Or two, did the lab, who I'm supposed to trust is a great tester, but really their customer are these people that are that are growing, so they want to have the greatest best results for them, or they're going to stop going to them. I've seen it in multiple states now. And so I don't know. And so I think that when if you were already a home grower, because that's what we're talking about, somebody who's quitting, but unless you weren't successful before and you had a terrible experience with it, if you're a successful home grower and then you have to go into a dispo and buy some cannabis and you pay probably more than what you would have even have charged for your own, and for what's going to probably be 9 out of 10 times, or maybe a higher number, worse than what you would have grown on your own. It's really hard to say that you wouldn't go back to growing your own, even if it cost a little bit, just because you know that you know all of those things. You know that nothing was sprayed. You know that it's fresh and it hasn't sat there forever. You know that who gives a fuck what the test result is? It's something that you know you like and you're growing it again. You know what I
Well,
mean?
especially
All
now
of
that
those
there's
things.
so many failures. I follow the California Department of Cannabis Control or whatever, just to see all the recalls. And it's alarming. Every single day, there's dozens of different products being recalled, large brands, large scale. So it's, again, more and more of a reason to beat that drum, not to like fear monger or anything, but sometimes that's what motivates people. Every other fucking, you know, broadcast uses it to some extent. But I'm not just doing it to do that. It's the actual reality of the situation. You're safer off if you don't spray anything on your own plants. You know you didn't spray anything on there, so it's not going to be on there. If you source no heavy metals in your materials, like you can easily get from Build a Soil or any reputable garden center, um, you can do your own testing too. It's not something that you have to trust some third party or outside source. I did want to jump back a little bit because I want to give a shout out. I'm probably going to not sound so good for a second, but I'm going to turn off my virtual background and show the page 18 from 50 Strains of Green because it is, I recalled correctly, Dominatrix from Empire Breeding Company is featured in 50 Strains of Green. And so Mr. Tight was the breeder and Spartan's got it right there. Let's see. How do I do this? Choose video filter, choose virtual background. All right, there we go. We're doing it live, folks. None. Boom. So here's the text portion or whatever you could see. Dominatrix number 18, some photos. But shout out to Mr. Tight, Empire Breeding Company. That was, I'll read out the cross too, just because why not? It is a Rugburn OG mother crossed to the father, which is duct tape. Duct tape is GG4. Shout out to Josie Wales and Dosido. So flowering time 9 to 10 weeks. Yield heavy, lemon, pine, and fuel for the aroma. Reported effects uplifting, focused, pain relieving. chemotype, pinene, limonene, myrcene. So there's some information. I wrote up a whole bunch more about that. Interestingly enough, at that Plumeria festival, I got a little Plumeria handbook because, as somebody who wrote 50 Strains of Green, of course, I'm going to be interested in all the different varieties of Plumeria. So it's kind of funny to see that sort of similarity where you can go and start looking at all these different varieties. It's upside down, but this is the fourth edition of this Plumeria handbook and just showing off a couple of the different photos. It's interesting, the crossover and parallels that you can see there, just simply displayed. But yeah, big shout out to Tight. And I wanted to pass it to maybe Tao and see if he has any thoughts or opinions on the whole why growers are quitting or have quit, and maybe why they shouldn't have or
I
should
don't know,
continue.
but something struck me when Spartan was like, unless they're doing it for medical, they're not like that motivated now that it's everywhere and whatnot. But I kind of think it's like medical for me because if I don't have plants, man, I am sick. So even in like all
Yeah,
my
that's what I
things,
mean, bro. It's medical, and it's like you don't.
yeah,
It's not.
and like,
It's like another thing. It's like I want to make sure it's clean because
yeah,
I need that effect. I want to pick the strain or the whatever combo I'm using or whatever the medicine I'm making. I want to do that the same way so I can get that same effect every fucking time.
yeah. But I'm just saying, just the act of actually cultivating the plant is medical to me. And
Like
like
Spartan said, it's
Ed
like having a pet.
Rosenthal, right? Like Ed Rosenthal said, smoking weed isn't addictive, but growing it is. And yeah, like I said, if I don't have plants, man, I feel some bad way. So I pretty much,
I
even in the
think,
darkest moments, I have at least a couple going somewhere.
to be honest,
Somewhere.
since I've started growing cannabis, I've never not grown cannabis. But if I
Naming it pretty much.
But if I did have to, I think I would have to grow like, house plants. I would be getting fucking crazy with shit. You know what I mean? I'd be
I think
vegetables
it might have
inside.
been
I'd be doing vegetables inside. I'd be doing some shit.
2 months where I didn't have them in. No, there was more than that where I didn't have them inside, but I put them outside and I was going to them regularly. And when that was finished, then I moved back into a place where I could have some plants. So yeah, it was very short amount of time that I ever didn't have an actual plant in my possession to take care of, and I like it like that.
A lot of people are saying growing is therapy for them, and a lot of people are also saying power is expensive, and that is very true. I think many might have to resort to the old Tao ways and go guerrilla grow style and just put some out in nature somewhere, find a hiking trail that's not well foot trafficked, and plant a few and hope for the best, but it can be difficult.
Grow at night. So usually power's cheaper at night.
That's another, like,
Yeah,
even
or
looking into
even
your local electric company. San Diego, for example, SDG&E offers like electric vehicle charging rates, which are time of use. So for people that want to charge their electric car at night, instead of overloading the grid during the day while it's hot, people are trying to run their fans and air conditioners, etc. There's a lot less load from like 10 p.m. to like 4 a.m. So they could set up to charge their car from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. or whatever. 9, I think, is actually the hour where you look at it's like 3 times as expensive from 4 to 9 p.m. From 9 p.m. to like 6 a.m., it's like a quarter the cost. So that's when I always have my grow set up to like come on at like 9:15 p.m. In terms of the light for that reason. And also the sun's down, it's cooler, it's easier to regulate the temperature. Multi-benefit for those who haven't already thought of that and implemented it into their grow. That's a good way to save money and make growing just easier. One of the biggest problems I see with newer growers is not being able to maintain their environment. So if you're growing during the daytime with your lights on, just switching to the nighttime could literally save you money on trying to, run AC or much higher fans and things like that.
Well, generally speaking, it just evens everything out no matter where you're at, because usually wherever you're living, the nighttime is the lowest temperature part of the day. So you're introducing heat at that point, which helps you if you need the heat, or if you don't need the heat, you're introducing it at the best time for it. So
Win-win.
there's a lot of benefits to running the lights at the night. I'm sorry, I'm changing the whole fucking topic of the show.
No, no, it's all good. I think that it matters to keeping people in the game because sometimes something that little can give them the edge that makes their grow that little bit better. Environment, I would say, is a huge portion. I know a lot of people point to genetics, but there's so many good genetics at this point. If you get a decent reputable cut or a decent seed, a handful of them, pop a few, you're going to find something okay that'll probably perform for you in 2024. There's so many people doing good work now. There's a lot of junk, but it's just like copycats of people that are probably doing good work. So it's not going to be that bad. And so you're better off today than you were 10 years ago popping anything
Oh my
in a
God,
lot of
so much
cases.
so. So much so. Jack Beanstalk and check. Power is expensive, but conventional therapy cost is higher. I'm with him. I'm with him on that.
Good points. I would agree with Spartan's earlier comment that plants are like a pet, and that one, they may require attention and your commitment and, love and passion to raise it the ideal way and to give it the best life. However, in doing so, it rewards you. It gives back. There's that happy feeling you get when you come home to that pet, whether it's a cat or a dog. It greets you at the door happily, and you can enjoy your time spent with them. And so there's a lot of, rearing anything. But I do think plants, a lot of people that maybe even aren't so much social or people, they can better connect with or relate to nature. A lot of people are disconnected from nature. It's even if you live in a city, like growing a few plants will get your sort of roots back underneath you and make you feel
Absolutely. And you
connected.
get, I'm sorry to step on you, but I think that's so important that that point to highlight a little bit is that the connection you get with the plant. And it's a connection with work, doing something with your own hands as well, right? So you can even boil it down to like if you show a child how to garden, give them one plant like a tomato plant, and maybe they've always resisted eating tomatoes. And but if they grew that tomato themselves, they grew that vegetable, what it doesn't have to be a tomato, it could be a carrot, it could be whatever the hell it is. Um, it's gonna be the best fucking one they ever ate. Guaranteed, because it's that, all that time that you put into doing something, you have to get that internal pride. Same thing with your cannabis. It's gonna be better, I guarantee it, just because you put all that work. Now, it might not be the best the very first time, but you're gonna learn and you don't give up, and every time is better. It's like so exciting to see, especially new growers get the second grow, the third grow, the fourth grow in. You know what I mean? Get past the first grow. That's my biggest advice, to get growing again. Just get past the first grow, just get past it and get to the second grow because you're going to improve. Everything is going to be like riding that bike and learning it again. All those, you know, all those actions are going to be remembered. You're going to get back in the groove and you're going to crush it. And you're going to be glad you did.
Ron Finley is a guy who called himself, or he's a educator, but he had the term like be a gangster gardener, getting some kids in LA into gardening that were in maybe situations where they would have otherwise joined gangs and things like that. And he made the comment, a kid who grows kale is going to eat that kale. And otherwise, like he was challenging the argument that a lot of these people in certain areas aren't eating the healthy foods even when provided them. And this kind of turned that on its head because he showed if you get their hands involved into it in the cultivation process and they can see it grow and harvest it and wash it and eat it themselves, they're way more, like Spartan said, likely to enjoy it and think that it's amazing and have that connection to it, just like we do with cannabis or anything that we grow. Like I never would have thought that I would care so much about plumeria, but my wife brought one home that like sat outside her work that no one claimed, and somebody else was trying to root it. It failed. She brought it home, successfully rooted it. I threw it in a pot. It grew from like two little branches, and now it's like got six plus, and it puts out these big, beautiful yellow flowers, and it just smells amazing. And I'm always excited the time of the year when it starts to bloom. It's like it's really it brightens up my day when I walk past it. Like it's right by where I park my car, so I see it pretty often, and it's something that makes your life just that little bit better. And I think having a positive thing to brighten your day, I think that's some maybe I've commented that I haven't seen as positive lately on some regards, and I think it might be because I haven't been gardening. I need to get back in the fucking garden, man. I do feel off. I feel like I'm itching a little bit to get in the garden. The whole addiction comment, it does kind of ring true a bit because I've always felt like post crop depression almost if I don't get another crop going. Like when my grow was so small I could only fit one or two, like however many plants, but I didn't have a veg area. It would be like all veg, all flower, and then drying in that same tent, right? So during that like drying period, I didn't have things going necessarily. I didn't have the foresight. Well, I was using clone domes and stuff. If I was intelligent, I would set it up on time, but there'd be that, little window of like a few days or a week or whatever until I cleaned up and reset. And in that time, I felt like how I feel right now. I'm like itching to grow again. Like I just need to do this or that. And there's usually one or two things holding me back. I have to put something else ahead of it. And uh, knocking those things off that checklist or doing whatever you have to do to make it happen is often so worth it because often I delay doing certain things. And then once I actually do it, I'm like, oh, it didn't take as long as I thought it was going to. And then when I actually get it done, the satisfaction of doing it was well worth whatever suffering I had to go through to make it happen. And sometimes it is suffering. I have seriously bad injuries in my hands, my neck, my back. So when I'm gardening, oftentimes I'm physically in pain. And it might be a 4, it might be a 6, it might be an 8 out of 10. I might be like a 10 out of 10. Like I can hardly fucking move. And I'm gonna have to go in there and water those plants. They don't give a shit that my back is locked out. They don't give a shit that my hands are cramped up. And they don't give a shit that I just hiked 16 miles the day before, and I'm dehydrated. I'm tired. I just was sick or just got hurt. They don't know. They just are trying to live. And we often are their sole caretaker. So it's on us to keep them alive and happy. And so it is a challenge that I understand a lot of people do quit. And we're probably not making the best argument for why you should keep going yet. But I do think the uniqueness and experience that we have touched on a little bit of being able to control everything, and also like there's new stuff all the time. There's different strains and different, products and things like that. And occasionally some of them are actually worth the hype. A lot of the times it's not, it's just a hype train. A lot of times it's just bullshit. But like when Gorilla Glue came around, a lot of people thought, oh, this is just going to be, hype, but it's still around today. And a lot of people still really enjoy it. So I think sometimes it lives up to the expectation and then some. So every few oftentimes in your life, you're gonna maybe get struck by that thing that really surprised you and impressed you. And we got a good question about LEDs that maybe we could get to, because I think it goes into we did have Q&A on the docket for tonight. So Minnesota grower, longtime listener, always asking good questions, says, how does an LED light bar usually fail? Does it dim or just go dark? MTBF. I don't know what that means. Wondering when to have a spare on deck.
I mean, I think that's going to be super contextual. I'm not a light expert, but I think that sometimes I mean, if you have like, if you have like a Timu light or maybe something lower on the quality scale, I think that maybe your failure points might be your connectors for like the very delicate parts of like your lights actually connecting to the board, that kind of stuff. Or little small idiosyncrasies that like maybe brands with a little bit more clout and like pedigree in their name, maybe have figured out to do, or at least have good quality control. Because the other part is that like there was a video that was going around like a few weeks ago that I had seen where people were learning how like motherboards on computers are made, or like if you ever like seen like why is it called an i7, why is it an i6, and the reason is because when they're making them they actually make all of them at once, or a lot of them at once, and then certain ones through the manufacturing process have defects, so that's how they get delineated. So actually in a certain sort of way you could say that your board wasn't perfect and that's why it became an i6 and i7 or whatever it is. And in a similar way, I think this is the case. I mean, they're not made the same way, but I think a similar kind of circuit boards and things, you know, um, it's an amalgamation of different tools. Curious what other people are going to say.
Got to follow up with the MTBF, mean time before failure. I hadn't heard that one before, so thank you, Minnesota grower, for that abbreviation and the explanation on that. I do agree with Matthew. Sometimes it is contextual. I will say, even a lighting company that I greatly support and enjoy using their product, HLG, I've seen a handful of growers get like single strips. And I'd say they were one of the earlier LED manufacturers, and their type of board would be more susceptible to this, I think, than some of the more modern ones. But some of them were actually damaged by people spraying them with like water, and that can cause strings to go out. So if you are foliating like a light that's not IP65 or some sort of waterproofed, then you might expect the lifespan to be a lot shorter. So be aware if your light is or isn't waterproof or resistant, and then act accordingly, I guess. If it isn't, make sure to cover it, even if you think that the spray might not get up there, putting something over it or removing it, or however you have to go about doing it, depending on the size of your light and grow, etc. It can be inconvenient, but we're only spraying our plants so often. Um, I mean, it might even be every 3 days, but adding that extra 10 or 15 minutes to save your life years of, because a well-maintained LED will run for years. Like most of them don't die. Most people I know that have switched have never had to replace it. The light gets replaced because there's a newer, more efficient one that they want. Like I have cobs, and I'm like, maybe I could get my, bar LED going on because there's plenty of great ones at great costs. But mine is still cranking out like over a gram a watt to like up to close to 2 grams per watt, and just like dank ass cannabis, and it crushes it in my space. I'm just like, fuck, man, it's hard for me to convince myself to spend any money when this thing just keeps on dumping
Absolutely.
dank on my, jars. It's like I have no complaints at all about it. So I'm going to run it until I start to see performance reduction, which has not been significant in the couple of years of growing with it, which is fantastic
And
because
it's likely that you have it dimmed down. So when you have
I've often
performance
had it dimmed down.
reduction, you dim it back up.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No,
So,
you're not wrong about that at all. And I do run it usually between like, I don't know, anywhere from 50 to 70 or 80%. And even at the point that it will lose, 5, 10, however many percent, I can just dial it up to that 80, 90 or whatever, and I'll get the same rough
absolutely.
PPFD ratings.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that Spartan probably knows better, but I think that LEDs lose like 1% a year of the brightness. And from what
And that's if
I've
they're fully
seen
clocked. If you underclock
people.
them,
Okay, there you go. And I've seen the most fails I've seen is just diodes die like certain, and like you're saying, Jack. Sometimes it's a line of diodes, but sometimes it's just sporadic diodes on a LED go. But other than that, I'm not too knowledgeable.
I also want to say that I meant CPUs. We had a person in chat mention that it wasn't motherboards, it was CPUs. That is what I was referring to. And also, like everyone else is saying, like for me, when I see a failure with lights, it is typically like everyone else is saying, the light is just kind of goes out. I don't typically see dimming. And like what Jack was saying too, I think that a lot of times, like, environmental factors, so to speak, are a big thing. Like maybe you didn't think that you sprayed your light, but you did, or over time, just the humidity of your room, if like maybe you're not so good about it, I think can have these like hard to quantify, but like sort of low level pressures over time that kind of stack.
So
environment definitely plays a role. Like when certain technology was being used in Vietnam, they had to like silver solder and black nitride the radio connections because they had these exposed connections, and in a jungle environment, it would cause rust, and then the rust causes corrosion, which makes the connection not work. So they needed reliable things like that. So they had to figure out ways to basically make metal extremely resistant or not able to be rusted, even in really terrible environments, so that it can continue to do its duty, I guess, through work.
I think outside of, I think if you just take a good quality, if you take a good quality grow light, so we remove bad workmanship, we remove all of some of the stuff that's still out there. Okay. You have a good quality grow light and it's an LED. Most of them have a 5-year warranty. So you can expect to have at least a life of 5 years. And usually the part on on that grow light that is the one that, like, as a grow light manufacturer, I can have a peek behind the curtain. The part that has that 5-year warranty, the one that's the kind of the bottleneck, is the driver.
I was just about to say that.
So I have to say, just from that alone, that tells me, and from, my limited experience working in here, and I've only been working about a year in the industry, and it's usually a driver. And that's why in our design of our lights, we made them plug and play. So they're just twist, turn it off, because so much easier to send a driver in the mail than a whole grow light. And so that tends to be like, if it's an issue, you can swap out a driver and boom, it's fixed.
Even the drivers are incredibly reliable now, and even that often those have their own
Yeah.
warranty that is 3 or 4 or 5 years. I can't remember the exact brand that I have, but it was like the main brand of driver, and its warranty was like equal to my LED light. And funny enough, the LED company went under, but my light is still fucking running like a champ. So it's didn't need the warranty, but it's I'm I've seen so few. I follow every single grower that I come across on X, on any, YouTube, on Instagram. And I have multiple accounts. I follow 7,500 on my one account, another 1,000 on my second backup, Jack underscore Greenstock account. And of all the growers I follow, I've seen like on one hand, I can count the number of LEDs that I've seen fail. And in like my little city, I can tell you how many guys have had bulbs explode on them, have had, things go wrong with their HIDs over time. It's not like they're infallible. And every 6 months to a year, they're buying new bulbs. That's what I was used to doing. Like when I first
Yeah.
started, we were using 600-watt HPSs and we were throwing them out every 6 months because we wanted to get the most out of it. And back then the money was right. So that was the thing to
Makes
do.
sense. Yeah. Especially the larger the scale you go, the bigger you go. It's like say it's a 10% loss every cycle. Well, what's 10% yield? What's that worth to you in dollars? Usually a lot more than what you'd pay in light bulbs. So that's why people were doing that. It just makes sense to do at that
Lights were cheap and
scale.
available and pounds were real expensive. So it made a
Yeah.
whole lot of sense to do it for all the time that I was growing under HIDs.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. But
And
yeah, I
that's
mean,
like
that's another thing with the warranty on the parts is like you have to be a little, there's some manufacturers a little sketchy. There was a event in California a little while ago called Light Wars, and Grandmaster level Thomas got to be able to be there, and with a bunch of other people from the industry. And the question was asked, "What who has here has at least a 1 year warranty? Raise your hand." And everybody on the panel, hands up. And they kept going 2 years, 3 years, for everybody up, all the way up to 5 year, everybody's hands up. 6 year, most of the panels goes down except for I think one person. I think it was one. And they had a 7 year. And Thomas looks over and he goes, "You guys have a 7 year warranty?" They're like, "Yeah, we got a 7 year warranty." And he goes, "Is that on the driver too?" And they're like, "No, not on the driver." It's like, okay, well. So yeah, that's a little sketch, but okay.
most people think of them as the same thing, but often they're from two different companies.
Yeah,
I would say
yeah, you're
almost
right.
exclusively that's the case. I think, God, I wish I almost want to walk over and look at my freaking driver, but yeah, there's one company that pretty much owns that market. I think it's like
Well, not really. I mean, there's always competition right now.
Meanwhile,
There's Meanwhile,
Meanwhile is huge.
Inventronics is doing really well right now.
Inventronics is the new one on the scene, I would say, but
Yeah,
they're definitely putting out good stuff, similar quality or as good or better. So,
I would say better at this point.
and you have the insight on the market. Haven't built a light in years, so
Yeah.
this I'm going on like old Reddit info and just growers secondhand. But both are capable, especially LEDs are relatively, I mean, the voltages and wattages and the ranges and things, they're very safe at this point. Like there's a lot of other shit that's running a lot more power, like drills and saws and shit like that. Like a lot of people are running way more power. It's usually more
The
short
heater,
interval.
your little space heater is pulling more power than most grow lights right now.
Toasters, dude, a blow
Yeah, air
dryer,
dryers.
yeah, air fryers and all these other like there's a lot of shit pulling a lot of power on a lot of people's grid. Grow lights are actually relatively, especially in like a small grow space, like some of them are just a couple 100 watts. It's like very, very minimal impact. So
Tesla.
go ahead, Tal.
I just said Tesla.
Yeah. Well, actually, I will say I just got a little adapter so I can plug into like a regular wall outlet, like a 120, and it's 1300 watts, which is, around a toaster. And
Yeah, that's not bad.
my neighbor who's on fixed income has a mini electric, and they said when they got the electric mini, they didn't notice their electric bill go up from 1 month to the next, and it's been like over a year now, and they charge it at home on the weekends. But they do like the EV thing, and like I guess nights and weekends is cheaper here, so they take advantage of that, and it works out. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about the grid and everything. Like 40% of our electricity comes from solar. So a lot of people get angry about any electrical use, but it's like most of
Yeah, but
it's
the Joshua Tree thing.
the fire, the or what are you referring to?
No, they're clearing out a bunch of Joshua Tree to put these big old solar panel like fields.
Farms.
But like they could have picked, I don't
Perfect.
know, some
No.
place with nothing in it or
How
Joshua
with
about
Tree
less
does
of
not
nothing
seem
in
like
it.
the ideal location, but
I
Yeah.
like I've seen the idea of waterways being covered. Like they cover waterways with that helps cool the water too. I thought that's kind of cool.
they even harness the energy of the waves going up and down, just like they have these
I love
buoys.
that too. I love the wave technology to be able to harness.
I saw a fish bridge recently where like You know how they like make a way for the fish to go up and over the dam rather than like cannoning them with a tube or whatever, or just damming them up and not letting them flow.
The tubes
So
are pretty interesting. They
yeah,
they like
I've
keep them
seen
around the
those.
pace, so they look pretty funny, but the fish seem fine. They end up on the other end
They do
and it
seem to
gets the
be
job
okay
done.
with it.
I guess better than being stuck and not able to get to their final destination, but ideally not as good as untouched nature or whatever. Those land bridges are pretty interesting, whether it's a fish or even like animals. They have land bridges where like highways and stuff would prevent them from
Oh, I've
going
seen
from one to the
those.
other.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's cool to give back some access. Nature is awesome, man. It's fun to enjoy and see all the. I think we have like hundreds of birds around here because one of the lagoons, like a nature preserve. So there's lots of beauty to be enjoyed if we give them back a little bit of space. But that said, it's also expensive as shit for people to survive. So if we have to fucking put up solar panels so that people have cheaper electricity and build more houses, then I'm also all good with that. But getting back on the grow side of things, we have a good question from Donkey Populous, who says, I'm currently running two 3x3s using four earth boxes. I want to hunt through some reg seeds. Wanted to hear your thoughts on running more than a single plant per earth box. Any drawbacks? I'll pass it first to Spartan Grow.
I actually do this regularly where I put two in the same pot and we just have to flip them a little sooner because they're going to veg out faster because they have half as much of a pot, remember? And another thing is you might find yourself having to feed them a little bit, like top dress a little bit more, or however you're feeding, or however you address if you run out of food. Um, Maybe top dress a little bit more at the beginning of flower when you flip or something like that because you're having two plants fighting in the same pot. Sometimes there is a drawback where one will get really aggressive and it'll kind of choke the other one out. But at the very least, you'll know if it's a male or female. So if you kept a clone, you can always grow it out again in its own pot. Um, but I like to just be able to get through when I'm pheno hunting, like what it sounds like you're doing. I would, yeah, you can share pots for sure. It can be done.
At least two per earth box. I've seen other people get crazy with real short wedges and do like three or six,
I've
even doing
done
like three in the front, three in the back, and just vegging them to like tiny little clone, like
I've done
6 inch or
four,
10 inch.
but I don't feel like I get a good expressions and all that, and they're not old enough, in my
I
opinion, like
agree.
sexually mature enough to really. I just think that's just too fast.
I
And
did three, like one on the side, one in the middle, one on the other side. The one in the
okay,
middle was a different strain. I had two of the same on the outside, and then one in the middle. The one in the middle was a little bit more of a slow grower, like indica dominant, whatever. The two on the outside literally grew over it and just like literally ate it alive. It blocked
yeah,
out its light and just starved that plant to death, and the two thrived. So from that point on, I've just always gone with two equally sized plants. I transplant them in, give them a nice top dress and water in when I do that, and I get great expressions out of both, as if I just grew one. It's as good, but actually usually better because getting the yield of one plant out of an earth box, you'd have to just veg it for a longer time, in my experience, to like fill out the roots. You could match yield with one plant versus two, but I think if you grow two plants, like let's say 12 inches tall by like 6 or 8 inches wide, throw them both into an earth box and flip that, it's gonna produce better than if you just had one plant of that same size, obviously, right, in the same earth box because it's hard for the roots to fill out the entire thing, but they can fill out half of it really easily. And with a good re-amended soil, um, I've gotten excellent expressions. Two per. It says, what would you clone um, before early flip? What point would you suggest to take clones before an early flip? Personally, like it depends on what you're hunting for. I like to sex test everything. So shout out to like Farmer Freeman, Easy XY. There's also many other services out there. So don't think they're the only ones that can do it, but you can get your plants sexed in veg while they're in solo cups, just like a few inches tall with the first set of leaves. Um, so that's my approach. So I know which ones are female, and then I start to select based on their growth morphology and things like that. Maybe take a clone when I do some topping if I want to get a quick, easy one that would have otherwise gone to waste. Um, Otherwise, like if you flip, sometimes the early you notice like some branches on the bottom of the plant aren't going to make it up to the top. They're going to get blocked out by the other plants around it. There's just not enough space in the tent. Maybe it grew too many shoots or whatever, or one's just looking a little weak. I like to take those off as I flip or early in flower. They're usually not flowering yet. They might show a little bit of sex or whatever, but if you put them back under like 18 hours light, maybe 24 hours light in your veg space, then they'll usually root and go back to veg just fine. So even if you already flipped, I think you're fine to go and get clones. I'm curious if Tao has any thoughts on the when to clone and or the how many plants to put into an earth box or city picker style
Well,
bed.
considering he's saying he wants to hunt through some reg seeds, I guess it depends on, yeah, like he could put in 6 and end up with 3 females. So that could be, an option. But I think 2 is good in Earth box. I really never used an Earth box, but from what I've seen, it looks like 2 is probably the best.
Kyle,
And
when are you going to use an earth box, man? You don't have to use what about a city picker? It's like
I need to get something. I do. I want to get it. I just got to do it.
you got to try it, man. I want you to try it. I think you'd really like it, man.
I'm sure I would love it. And
My
yeah, if you want to take cuttings as soon as you can, I would guess.
Yeah, I guess it's almost never too
That's
early.
kind of my answer to I didn't get to answer that part of the question, but that's my answer too. It really was like for me, like if we're talking ideal, my like if I can pick the perfect, like I'm growing one plant and I'm concentrating all my energy on one plant and I'm trying to make it absolutely perfect. I'd rather take my clones early in the lifespan of that veg plant so that as close as I am to flipping, I know what my plant's looking like going into veg. And what I mean by that is if I take a cut off of that plant, if I take, and it's usually going to be close to the top, if I take a cut off the plant, it's going to change the morphology of the plant a little bit. It's going to start the auxins and cytokines are going to rebalance and it's going to grow a little differently. I like to have that plant pretty much spread out so that if I can throw it into flower, I don't have to manipulate it too much. I can let it just grow up straight up. Because I'm in my head, in my situation, I'm just filling a space at 2 by 2 space. So I in veg, I'm trying to get that plant to like have the bottom of that 2 by 2 space, the bottom of that candelier chandelier, you know, and once it's there and it's filling in that space, I'm ready to flip, let it go. And to me, like if I'm cutting then at that point, I might be changing the shape. And I really want to avoid that. I will if I have to, because I want to preserve genetics, but it's not like the perfect situation.
It's not your SOP.
Right. It's not the SOP.
Matthew, do you have any thoughts about the donkey populace comment?
About the what?
The last question or two.
No, but what did you say?
I just asked if you had any thoughts or comments maybe on the their question.
He said, "Did you have any questions or thoughts on the donkey populace questions?" I think that's what
Oh,
or
okay. Yeah,
he was
yeah,
using the
yeah.
name.
Yeah. Right, right, right. No, because of the word, yeah, because those words put together, and I think I had a little bit of a bad connection. I just did not. I was curious what you had said. But no, I don't. Sorry. I would have
All
perhaps if it was different words that were said.
it's all good. It is definitely an interesting name. Shout out to you, Donkey Populace. We appreciate you. But yeah, good question. We've had some good ones so far. I probably missed a few earlier. I do apologize. If you had a question that you asked and we did not get to it, go ahead and drop it back in the comments if you have the energy to type it out or go find it earlier and copy and paste it. We won't be mad at you. We'll try and get to all of them. There's good conversation and a lot of stuff going on. So sometimes I miss a lot of the stuff that happens in the live chat or all messages. I see live chat on my computer here, and then underneath on my phone it says all messages. So if you haven't already done that earlier, click on over to the live chat or all messages so you don't get your stuff filtered out. But even when I do see all of them, technically, I'm not necessarily processing and copying and pasting them over. So we do occasionally miss some questions. So
We got some already coming in.
I see that. We've got Cake in a Cup says in the last couple of months in Australia, 2 new lighting manufacturers have started up. OEMs, manufacturers, I mean OEMs buying from the same factory as Mars and every other folding Fuker in 2024. So I think they're pointing out that a lot of these lights are made probably in the same factories, oftentimes in China. I think Mars, Spider Farmer, etc. You're seeing a lot of the same lights with just a different brand label slapped on it, which
That's super true. Super true.
you see in every space, from food to electronics. There's a lot of replication going on or knockoffs that might be even lower quality. I will say in the case of Mars and Spider Farmer, etc., they make actually a decent enough product at this point that I would trust it. They're not like, catching on fire or anything. They do put out an adequate amount of light in most cases. They're more modern models. They're decent priced. But if you have the extra cheddar, I think you get a little bit more when quality might be cheaper in the long run if you can find a little higher tier up. There also might be other reasons that you might want to buy from other companies, but I won't get too deep into the weeds on that stuff.
Yeah, but I'll put a little bit of an unfiltered opinion about this because as someone who lived in China and has a little bit of opinion about that kind of stuff, I know that as Americans and Westerners in general, there's this idea that Chinese stuff can be of low quality or tends to be. And that's totally true. However, I think for me, I think it's better to describe it more like in terms of reliability, which is functionally the same problem. But like, you can totally get stuff that is high quality that comes out of China. You might have to pay more, in which case maybe that doesn't make as much sense.
You always have to pay
Um,
more.
and you always have to, yes, well, this is always true, correct. So, but maybe
Just than like
the
the
over
cheaper
under
quality stuff.
the
But you're
over
saying like
under, yeah, well, the
compared,
over under might be good. The better Chinese stuff might be more expensive or would be more expensive than the maybe cheaper stuff that is said as that it is as good as the other stuff. But I guess that's what I'm trying to say. That's a bit of the wool. But then the other aspect of that is that when I say reliability, it's like, and what I think becomes problematic is that like you could technically get something good or even superior quality, but you don't know the first time you're going to get it, and you might not know like until the second, third, fourth, fifth time. Which at that point, somebody might be saying, "Well, who cares after the fifth time?" Well, it might matter when you're buying like hundreds of lights or dozens of lights at a time. If you are somebody for which that statement is a true one, then you know that might be an issue. But you might be able to, but because that's like a quality control thing and that sort of thing. Anyways, lights are very complicated, but
I
yeah,
agree
just
I think
try.
though.
that's an
I think that
amazing, good point, man. It's like this is going to be a very unpopular fucking statement, but I'm still going to stand behind it because I just speak the truth, or at least my truth, right? So this is what I see, and it's fucking the truth, really. And that's like if you took the entire world and you removed all of the country lines and you were just shopping for factories to produce your product, and your product is an LED light, would you want the company that's been producing LED lights for 20 years and is close to the resources of all the LED chips? Or would you want the one that's closest to your doorstep with 2 years experience that has logistic issues getting chips to them just because it's close to you?
even just looking at the
Man,
manufacturing, like the
yeah.
manufacturing capital of the world ain't here anymore. That's for sure. I mean, they're manufacturing a lot more. And like Matthew said,
Yeah,
just
they can
because
leak all
they
that
do
hexane
happen to
somewhere
make
else.
the stuff that's like sometimes low quality, they also happen to make the extreme high quality of things.
It's
Like
true.
they have the capacity to do both and do both extremely well. Even the low quality stuff, like the fact that it's so high margin, the fact that they can make it so cheaply is there's almost an
It's part of
impressive.
that, exactly. It's part of that integration. Yeah, so I do like to fight against that stereotype because I think it's outdated. I'm not saying it wasn't ever true and it isn't ever sometimes true. But I do think like yeah, like the fact of the matter is that you can't. It's hard for people to navigate, and if you're on the retail side, if, rather you're on the customer side of retail, then you're not really gonna have that insight. In a lot of cases for purposeful reasons, right? But like Jack and Spartan says eloquently enough that they can make it. It's just a question of do you know for sure you're going to get the thing that you think you're going to get? And that has been me before as well on both sides.
It's like even like a lot of people misunderstand like automotive. I think people just look at a car and a brand and then they think like, oh, that's, a cool look or a cool logo or a cool brand or whatever. And they don't think like who owns that? Like sometimes there's a brand within a brand that owns everything. Like Geely Auto owns Link and Co, which is less familiar here, but Volvo, Lotus, and Lev C, Polestar. So like Geely is a Chinese company and they make a lot of, or all of, in some cases, Volvo's vehicles. And a lot of people here in the US like don't even know how many brands are actually owned or made in China. So it's just like a lot of marketing and jargon to try and get over and avoid kind of what Matthew's describing. And accurately, a lot of people still have this sort of maybe false narrative in their head that everything that comes from China or is produced in China is of a lower quality. Which is not the case. If anybody has an iPhone, I think pretty much all of them are made in China, and that's considered by many the best
Yeah.
phone, right?
Yep.
Like it's the leader in the market. Everybody compares themselves to the iPhone. So even if it's not truly the best, like you might say, oh, my Android can do this and that. I'm an Android person, so I'm on your team. But most people consider the iPhone the best. And when you talk to those people, they're like, I can't have any phone but the iPhone. So it just
Well, and
shows.
even the Android, there's many parts that I'm sure come from China, and to get rid of regulations, right? They'll like construct it like 98% in China and then construct the last 2% somewhere else, and that's where it was made by, right? So even then you can't escape. People just want to think a certain way about
I
things.
think
I get
Ford at
it.
one point
I
said as
get
long
it.
as they put the logo on the car, they can consider
Yes,
it like
right.
they made it, right? So they could have somebody
Yeah.
else make the entire vehicle, and as long as they like put their logo on it, then they had their hand in the manufacturing process. So that's what happens when you outsource the manufacturing to the people, that aren't actually in the manufacturing. They're, in the business end of things and look at just the numbers. So it's interesting, but like I said, I don't feel one way or the other here or there. It's just interesting that a lot of people like have long held opinions, and it's hard to necessarily break through some of those. And I think you can just look at the people's gardens on Instagram or grow your own, whatever, wherever you follow. People are growing tank with those very lights.
Yeah, is there more? I know there's at least one or two LED manufacturers in America, but yeah, if you're gonna get light, you're gonna go where the manufacturing is, and it's mostly overseas. I'm certain of it, right?
Well,
Yeah.
so manufacturing, like there
And
was one
it's
in
Cal
Detroit.
with the most American statements. The most American
There you have
statement, right? You get your lights from China, correct? There,
There's
yes,
a
that's
there's a
right.
Detroit company that manufactures LEDs in Detroit. So shout out to them. I can't remember their actual name, but I recommended them to a few people. I'm blanking hard on their, but I got mine from Timber Grow Light, who was a San Diego manufacturer, and they were sourcing their parts from South Korea, which, some might argue is better than sourcing through China. But again, it gets into the politics and into the weeds, which I'm trying to avoid as much as possible. But people do consider those things when they invest their money, voting with their dollar, and you know the ethical decision some people feel is to maybe spend a little more to get it from a place where maybe there's more human rights. But again, it's not the people of China
Except
who's
for
making
when
up
it
those
comes to their
decisions.
phones.
I think Samsung is out of Korea too, so a lot of people do avoid at least China in that regard. But again, it's just one. I think that we should all get along. Fuck it, they make a lot of
Well,
cool
no,
shit.
yeah. I just think that like people should be. It's not. I mean, you're right. It does get political, so I don't want to. I don't want to stoke any flames. But I think it's more important to be like realistic rather than be political. Be like, look, man. And hopefully, it gives you like a negotiating edge when you're like deciding what light do I want to go to. I saw somebody say in the chat, what about Bob says here, like for them, they looked at a bunch of comparisons from Dr. Coco and they felt like they're all pretty close, somewhat close, and that the P series was the best price for them. So like, like if you know the game, then you can kind of make that decision. And there's always going to be people saying like, well, this is the best light ever of everyone and everywhere. But like
All time.
There's testing though, and
of
I do
all
think like
time.
Dr.
It's just like
MJ,
the sun.
even Micro does good
Exactly
testing,
right.
despite like he'll show lights that are better than his own and do the testing and show all the data and stuff like that. So look into the data, look into the testing. I will say I just drove past San Diego Zoo, and shout out to China for sending those pandas because that place was fucking packed, man. It was wall to wall. I
Oh
was over at
man,
the
people
Flaminaria
wanted the
Festival.
wow. I did not think people would care that much about the pandas. That's, for example, a bias of
They
mine, but there
care.
you go. They
They
care.
definitely
Panda
care.
diplomacy.
Pandemonium at San Diego Zoo. That's what the local news is hyping the shit out of it, and I love it, man. It's the panda diplomacy. I'm just gonna keep on hyping. I love seeing people unify and come together over even silly little stuff like that. Nature, man. It's
Locking up bears, that's good. Imagine you were that
they're
bear,
they're already
man. In
locked up,
San
and if they
Diego?
didn't,
Dude. Panda bears are
Hey,
savages, bro.
I'm
You should
Debbie
do some
Downer.
YouTube
I'm
searches.
sorry,
Pandas
everybody.
can be rough, man. They need to be
Oh, I
And
bet you
manipulated.
they are.
yeah.
But
Here's the thing,
is
Tal.
China
If we didn't do it, they would all be dead. They'd all be
they
gone
be
because
dead?
humans
Are
don't
they
give a fuck. We would hunt them and kill them into extinction and wear them for fucking coats,
where
just
do
like
they
we were
usually
doing up
hang
until the
out?
point
Is
that
it
there was like 2,000 of them left, and then we brought them back to a decent number, but they're
to
still
a thing?
endangered.
So what are you saying? They owe us? Is that what you're saying?
I think that if we want to keep a little bit of nature around,
We're
if we don't want to
saying
be like
that.
California and kill off all of our grizzlies, we have no grizzlies in California since 1924. You
Well,
know,
maybe if they would stop eating us, we wouldn't have to do things
it
like
was
that.
their fault.
I
We killed
mean,
them
come
off.
on.
Quit
They're
fucking
like
eating
the
us.
monsters of our
Well, now
genes.
they're
It's in
going
our
to move up
DNA.
in the north, and they're gonna get with some polar bears, and we're gonna have a huge problem. It's gonna
They're
be
starting to
alien versus
release.
predator again.
Oh,
They're
damn.
That,
releasing grizzlies back into the Midwest and certain areas of the country. So get
In the
ready, folks.
Midwest, is that? I guess they are supposed to be there, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
So
well, I saw a black bear on the road here in Pennsylvania, man.
Oh wow.
my
They got
brother
it
lives in
like
the
Well, it wasn't
county
on
with
the
the
road. It
most black
was,
bear sightings in Ohio. They're
It's a
definitely
There's
out there.
bear.
plenty. There's plenty of bear here for sure in Michigan.
yeah.
Hey,
Black bear are
boomer.
a lot less scary than grizzly, but they'll still fuck you up.
Where I used to live, there was no bears, except for maybe,
A certain
Papa
kind.
Bear
The
from the
bear.
gang. Yeah. Anyway, shit, I had something in my brain that I was gonna let out, but I forgot it. I forget. Yeah.
Matthew, have you grown cannabis in the past? And is there any way that you would be convinced to start growing again, or is it your job with the being
I
mobile?
have, I have, but like I was saying to somebody recently, and if people ask me like, "Hey, do you grow?" Present tense. No, I can't. I don't think I can say that anymore. I don't know think I can say that anymore. But I do get a bunch of seeds from people, and I definitely like to, could I be convinced? I think I could be. I think that when I stop, when I stop getting so busy, maybe I can put some time into it. The thing also, I had a conversation with somebody about this. I think I said it last time too, that we were talking about this, but um, I think there is something to be said. I'm not saying that people who don't do this or who cultivate in a commercial setting, but then also grow at their home is like doing something untoward. But I do wonder about like the biosecurity risks about that, especially if I'm going to people's grows and things. I'm pretty, there's no way for people to check. So they just have to trust me when I say like I put a lot of effort into, not being a reservoir and like that kind of a thing. And usually I have enough time in between that like there's not going to be an issue. But I do wonder about that, especially for like microbial stuff. Like there ain't nobody going through TSA with like a clean room exercise or none of that stuff. You got to wonder what's on their shoes, inside their, clothing fibers and other sorts of stuff. So I feel conflicted, I guess, because there's research that comes out about how like easy some of these things can move across continents. Um, so yeah, I just think about what do you guys think? Do you think that's a
I
good
think
reason, or do you think that's a
I,
little bit
I
over
think
egging the
challenge
pudding?
me, challenge my immune system, fucking throw it at me. Same thing with my plants.
Throw it
Fuck
at
it.
your
That's what I
about your
do.
plant's immune system too?
Yeah, yeah. And if it's weak, it's got to
You want to
go.
pay me
Just
to
gonna
do it?
keep. Yeah, just gonna keep the ones that survive it and are strong, and then get rid of the ones that can't survive that shit. I need strong plants.
Maybe that's the game. Maybe that's the play. Maybe I'll ask people like that, I will be Typhoid Mary and you can pay me for the exercise. It'll be
You got to
a
wear like a zombie
biosecurity
mask when you
challenge.
do it.
Oh, you think your perfectly healthy plant can just get rid of a hop lane viroid? Well, here in this vial. You want
Could
can
I
I be
Spread it
like
through your
James
whole
Brandy?
room.
like they used to
For
have the
$1
chicken
million
pox
dollars,
parties?
can you prove to me? I'll buy those plants, right? Like, I know a lot of people looking to buy those plants.
Yeah, like the chicken pox parties. Bring it on over. We'll get everybody
Yeah,
immune to 'em.
I
it's
think
Yeah,
totally.
at some point they're going to do this if they're not already doing it in the larger commercial
We're
setting.
already doing it in the large petri dish of Earth. Um, I think,
it's
and
unavoidable,
that's what
right?
we.
Yeah.
Well, some people claim, and I'm sure at least 1% of them is right, that they've got plants that are resistant, right? Yeah, like, of the 1,000 growers that says it, probably like 10 of them actually has a resistant plant. And then like the other 99% are experiencing what might be attributed to some other factor.
And highlight the word resistant too. We're not saying proof. We're saying
Yeah,
resistant. You
yeah.
know, if you
We have to
continually
make
get
you
exposed
have
to
to have a
PM, you
standard
will
and then
get it.
see if it's better than that standard. That's the way to do it. Yeah, not just be like, oh, well, I put it out 1 year and we got no powdery mildew, so therefore you can pay plus 50% on these seeds. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah. And
Yeah,
boom,
I
party
Okay.
cannot.
mildew. And then because you got 5 billion different strains of party mildew.
I must
Yeah,
reiterate.
yeah.
I must reiterate what Spartan just said, because being a motorcyclist and I got clothing or outerwear that was water resistant, and I got clothing that was waterproof, and there is a
Uh-huh.
large difference between the two. So yeah, just to
That's for
reiterate.
sure, especially when you're speeding down the rainy highway, right?
Yeah, water finds its way, man. It's unbelievable. It really is. But that being said, so Matthew, you think there is such a reality as a totally haploid blah, HPLVD totally no, yeah, what's the other
A
word? That
totally
resistant,
a totally immune
waterproof.
proof,
Yes,
hoplite and viroid proof plant.
Or
there you go.
Well,
resistant,
we
More than
did
resistant
it with
one.
to
hops.
res
Well, like, yeah, so if we define proof as like can't get it, it won't be in the system. I think probably not. If we define it by from what I only based on what we know from like hop and other sorts of things. But people are working for it. I mean, I know for a fact, this could be a topic if we wanted to talk about it, but I've definitely seen people post about various companies posting about like genetic modification. Like people are just stepping 10 steps into the direction of that. There's people who
Yes.
want to go through a marker assisted breeding, so more traditional breeding, but they do sequencing to be like, yep, that's the gene we wanted. Oh, yep, that's the allele we wanted. And now we're going to put these two together so that all of their offspring will definitely totally have the effect that we want against these things. So I think that, I mean, we're already seeing plants that don't display symptoms of cannabis, for hoplite and viroid. So I mean, I think that's such a huge precedent for it being possible. And that's without all of the crazy, milieu that I just mentioned. So give us 5 to 10 years. Whether or not that's the way you want things to go or not, that's another question, which is valid. But like, I think that people with lots of money will make that decision for people who do not.
People who are not. Uh,
Yes.
It's
yeah.
not really our say, right? Some private company's going to go and do it,
Somebody's just gonna do it, and then I mean,
whether here or in some
that
other
sounds
country.
defeatist and fatalistic, but I feel like, what am I gonna do about it?
Well, it's going to
Oh,
happen here or somewhere else. And so it's like I think rather
That's the
than
other thing.
worry about like how it could ruin shit, just kind of mentally prepare for the fact that that's an option and
you
we
know what
can
I saw?
select to choose to not consume or whatever, have those products. If, you
Yeah,
know, eventually I think it's probably
They're
gonna be a price
coming.
point thing, like growing coffee outside the shade. They GMO'd it so they could grow in the sun, where before it could only grow in shade and it made it more expensive and more difficult to farm and higher value. So sometimes it's as simple as something like that, just to drive cost and availability.
Well, I saw an Instagram post about a class on CRISPR concerning cannabis. I don't know how deep it went. It was $50 course, so it couldn't go in that deep. But I don't think that's advisable in my opinion, man. Because the one article that I noticed about CRISPR, they were trying to make a cassava plant virus resistant to something, and they inadvertently uh, somehow made the virus evolve to a point where they couldn't kill it. So yeah, they could have,
yeah, I've
I
played
don't
that
know.
game. I've
Is
watched
that
that
right?
movie.
Okay. Yeah.
I've read
So
Frankenstein.
shit can happen. Bad shit can happen. But it's already happening. I'm sure. Yeah, like you're saying, people with the money are gonna definitely. They're already making like THC through yeast and GMO yeast, where they put in a certain feed for the yeast, and it pushes out THC, or they can make it make
Yeah.
whatever they want, CBD, CBG, even
Diesel.
make up cannabinoids that aren't even in nature. They were saying.
I'm not
So
mad
yeah,
about it.
it's
Maybe they
crazy.
can make some better medicine. That'd be sweet. I'm not mad about it.
That's right, right. To each their own. But for me and my family, we're gonna smoke the weed that I grow, man. Not that I got
Me
a
too,
family,
man.
but
I'm
I
with you.
adopted this dog, man. I'm loving this dog, by the way. Just saying.
What kind of dog?
That dog you just had on last
It,
time.
it's that
Oh
poodle one, that
yeah,
little black one. And I can't say I
the
really adopted it,
ferocious
but
one, that huge killer.
the killer, yeah, beware. But the owner, it's this chick next door. She's like, because I go, let her in anytime you want. She's like, she was begging to go inside your house. I'm like, all right. So yeah, I, I'm thinking now about this time where I was hanging out with this chick for quite a while. She had a kid, and me and the kid got along really well. And the kid's fine, like, but when like I broke up with the chick, well, basically she broke up with me. I would guess, yeah, that was it. But anyway, the point being, like the kid, she was all worried how the kid was going to be and all that, because like I like hanging out with kids because like I get stoned and I love playing and just being a kid. But it's all cool, and like yeah, I saw her, like I see her, still talk to her and all that. The mother, and not so much the kid, but yeah, it's all cool. And but that's what I'm thinking is gonna happen with this poor puppy. If I ever get separated, the poor puppy, I don't know if it's gonna be devastating, me or her. But all right, now I babbled my personal
Dog's
shit.
not gonna
Sorry,
know. He's
everyone.
not
Now
I
gonna
what's
know.
gonna
apologize.
happen is the dog's gonna run away and you're gonna find it at your place, man.
Yeah. The dog knows where you are.
You know
Just don't
what?
burn that bridge, Tao.
I was gonna say, yeah, maybe
Yeah, it's your responsibility now, Tao.
you know what they were saying? Like if I'm 40 and she's 20, I'm twice her age. But when I'm 60 and she's another
40.
20,
40.
yeah, that's only 2/3 my age. So perhaps me,
Math is
all
mathing.
the three of us can hang
Math
out
is
together
math.
till we die.
You heard it here first. And Tao, you age in
There you go.
There
reverse,
you
so
go.
even double
There
that
you go.
number.
Oh, it's
Right.
different. No wonder it makes numbers
Quadruple.
kind of hard to calculate, I get.
Yeah, I have to get everyone that I enjoy being around on the cookie a day at least, so that they can hang out with me. You know, I'm gonna lose everyone. Sorry, man.
There's this
I
whole
don't want.
new bio age
There's
push.
some
You have your
Silver
actual
Surfer stuff
age.
going on with you, Tao.
Yeah, I don't want to draw. I don't want to dance on your graves. Never,
I'm with
man.
you, but
Ever not.
I'm just taking the RSO instead of the cookie, but it's the same diet,
Yeah,
man.
yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. At least a cookie, because yeah, now I'm kind of converted, man. I'm gonna think I'm gonna take like start weaning off a little, because yeah, I'm eating a lot and I'm not feeling it like I used to. But my body is all healthy. I mean, that's not what I mean. Like I want to enjoy it a little more too, you know, in my head.
You want to get high and be protected from the ailments.
Yeah, yeah. And there's a
I'm with
I
fine
you.
think that's
line
a,
in
I
But
there
that's
think
why
when
you
that's
can
a
continue. That's why you
valid.
continue your diet just how you have it, and then you dab, and
right that
that's what
oh
pushes you over the
but
top.
then what happens when my tolerance gets to the point where that isn't it anymore?
We're not there yet,
Then
so why would we
all
worry
right,
about that? We're not even
okay.
there. Why are we worrying about things like that?
You take a 1 day tolerance break and then you smoke and you feel higher than you were in high school the first time.
Yeah, you know why I'm worried? Because when I ran out of cookies, man, I feel like I age 3 days in one day.
10x.
Yeah, so
You
that's why
caught up
I'm a
with all
little
the
worried.
age
Oh,
that
and I can't run out.
you're
I got to make
beating.
sure I titrate this and have it till the day I die, which is going to be a long, long time away. So got to keep it going. Yeah.
But
Nothing wrong with that.
since Jack brought it up, like with let's say questions or something to get to. We have with CRISPR or some other things going on. Like there's a lot more of that science coming around. I'm curious if the chat or for you guys, does that like change? Do you think that we should get organized? I think people should be informed about anything. So like that is always that's always going to be what I advocate for. But I'm being a little bit vague. I guess what I'm trying to say is not just that kind of stuff, but like in general, there's research coming along. Do people feel like in the chat that even like the genomic sequencing is like a bad idea, and that we should just leave it up to mystery, or should it really take 10 years to get a trait that you want? that kind of
I
a
don't think it
thing? Or
necessarily has to. Some people are better pickers than others, but if you need the assistance, then take it. And it's some people will use both things. They have their intuition, their nose, whatever other metric. But I think the coding is useless unless you have a really good person in the field that can actually tie it to the trait. So it's like you really need to know the plants extremely well to be able to sample and understand what you even have, and then realize if it's even distinctly that different than what everybody else has, or if it's just kind of a common thing that anybody in the market can get access to, which I think more often is the case than not. And there's more and more prior art, as it's called in the patent copyright space, that's getting out there in terms of genomic information. And companies like SC Labs have supposedly mapped like 10 or 15 or 20 different terpenes so that they can tell you from 2 weeks into veg that it will or will not have X, Y, or Z terpene. And while I think that's a valuable tool in the tool belt, I think it's still at the point of unaffordable for most hobby breeders. And to the point of CRISPR, I think that a lot of people are gonna just have a natural ick reaction to that and not want it. We tend to be a more like naturalist or pure community across the board in one way or another. And I think more and more people want the, you know, purest form of the plant or whatever. And I don't think they're going to necessarily consider that to be the one that's GMO'd, but it depends on what the GMO is or what it's for. It's like if it just makes it yield way more, but it still has all the same medical effects. I don't think people are going to complain about lower prices with the same effect. But I think like the purists like ourselves are going to be like, we're going to grow our own and consume it, like Tao said earlier, from the plant.
Wait a minute, Jack. Did you just say you don't think people are going to complain about lower prices? I
some
heard
people will,
I
certainly.
hear lots I hear lots of people complain about those things.
Well, that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, why growers are quitting. I think a lot of people that are
Yeah.
growing it, that were selling it, lower prices really hurt their bottom line and ability to continue to operate. Because if they set up a big grow and they don't have anybody buying from them anymore, and it's just like offsetting their own costs, they'd have to consume a massive amount to make it worth it. Otherwise, they're gonna have to start turning off lights or scaling back or not growing in the
growing,
summer, etc.
growing better weed.
That's the ultimate goal at the end.
For
But
me, for me, like my mind always goes to how like and I guess this is speculative. I don't know how proven this is, but it seems like and we even look like a few decades in the past to like high times, which apparently is gone now. But like the buds were looking very larfy, very small. And you look at like, chunky, big old colas like we have now, when you have plants go when they escape cultivation and when they grow without people's involvement for a long enough time, flower being smaller and smaller, or the inflorescence being smaller, it tends to be the case that things go from chunky to not. And so like that's like a trait that everyone tends to like. But I wouldn't know. I mean, I don't know how natural it really is, to be honest. And then I mean, I know Jack and Spartan, I think have all both talked about situations where you've grown something and you see it visually and it doesn't have some of those traits that like that chunkiness. But man, does it hit or have some interesting effects or tastes and that kind of stuff. So kind of don't judge the book by its cover, but at the same time, people won't buy a book that doesn't look good, right?
Well, there's ways around that then. Then if it's a old school, I like to call some of those old school bud structures. The old school bud structures, some of those 1970s leafy fucking larfy buds have some fucking amazing highs. So what do we do as growers? We got to be always the MacGyvers, I like to call it, in the grow room. What we've done, me and my buddy Baked Ponies, is like, okay, then we won't harvest that as product. We'll harvest that fresh frozen, make it turn it into a concentrate. Now it doesn't matter what the bud looks like, right? Because it's concentrate. So, okay, it's not pretty, but the high is awesome. Okay, let's just concentrate that so people will see you'll still make a beautiful concentrate with it. And it's still a beautiful product, but now you take away that negative, right? So that they can't even perceive that. So now they can still enjoy the high and not even be influenced by that old school look. What was the topic that we were just talking about? Oh, about the you'd brought up, Matthew, about the CRISPR and stuff like that. So for me,
Yeah, like breeding techniques in general. It doesn't have to just be like,
yeah,
GMO,
but
Frankenstein
I
stuff.
love the genetic sequencing of it. I mean, that's blows my mind if they could do
Me
that.
too.
If they could genetically sequence cannabis, wow. I mean, if they can do the sycamore tree, why can't they do cannabis? Let's do this. But
Right?
Well,
Well,
I
they
think they
have,
got
right?
the one
Medicinal
plan.
genomics has done the
Yeah,
full Jamaican lion. So it's sequenced, and now it's
yeah,
just a matter of
like I
sequencing
don't even
more.
know truly what that means, but I think it's limited the way like to go to Matthew's example. If you know the allele, right, or the loci, I don't know, Matthew, you might know better, but whatever, you know the
Yeah.
allele thingy where if you have that allele, it's mold proof, okay? And then you have another plant, and you could look at the genetics of that, and that has the same exact allele.
so
Then
like a
you
genetic
cross
marker.
those
We're
two,
saying,
and
okay,
there's
we can
only
match
that
them up.
option for the offspring to have. So it's going to have that mold resistance. But all the other factors involved is where it'll get, you know, so it's in that respect, it's limited unless you check and do all the things that you want to check boxes for and then try cross it. And then it might taste like shit or not grow good, you know?
Yeah,
I
but
don't
at the
know
same
how
at the
far they
same
Absolutely.
have
aspect,
all
you
the
could do, yeah,
information.
but the same
Absolutely.
aspect is more like this, Tao. As a grower, you would like submit a DNA sample of all of your plants you're growing. Say maybe you have 10 cultivars going, we'll say, and you're looking for, we'll say, powdery mildew resistance, and say it's a recessive trait, right? Obviously. And say it pops up on fucking like three of your strains. Think of the time that you just saved in breeding by
There
just
you go.
knowing
Right.
that, by just knowing that,
There you go.
okay, you got three of these that have the recessive, and I can smack these three together and start working the line. Just that as a grower, being able to do that. But flip side is
Makes it real useful. You're right.
we're opening up the genetics to some maybe nefarious third party who'll be able to take the information and do what they will with it. So that's the big I
Right.
guess I would
Yeah.
say drawback, with like another Phylos situation kind of a thing. But
Right.
Yeah, I'm
there
seeing
is
some of
still
that
a
coming. I'm
benefit.
seeing some of that come back. Various groups and also newer groups coming around being like, yeah, this time it'll be different. And I don't know, people were sour on it at the very beginning. People were very distrustful. Like I often like to muse that people are the community, if you can call it that, is like, I don't know about all this. This seems like you know, red flag. And then
And
Well,
then
yeah,
to be
like
things
proven
happen.
right.
Yeah, exactly. So I can't knock people who like are literally just following the news and making an informed decision based on the past. Um, but I like to think that theoretically it'd be possible. And like Jack said, there are people, medicinal genomics and various other ones that are publishing research. And it goes to what Spartan and Tao was talking about with like, could you get a resistant plant? Sure. The other thing, like what you were saying, Tao, about like how it can be a little bit like probabilistic, what the actual result you get, because it'll depend. I mean, we're speaking in generalities, so it kind of depends on what the gene does, and it kind of depends on what the expressed thing that it does interacts with all the other things that the plant does. And if it goes through all that trial, like let's say it's I don't know, as some sort of chemical that or toxin that the plant produces that hurts, powdery mildew and maybe most fungi as well. Because that can be the difference, right? Is that maybe it's more specific. But then you always have to like trial, always, no matter what. It's not that you don't necessarily know what to expect, because hopefully you know what these genes do or what most of the genes do and what things like proteins and things that are the same shape are likely to do in certain contexts. And then you got to murder board. If we're talking about resistance, you got to like set like, okay, what does it look like when we apply 1,000 spores to 1 millimeter space, and what if we do 10,000 spores? What if we do 100,000 spores? And like how robust is that resistance? That's what breeders are not doing. And you've heard me say this diatribe many times, so I'll spare it for the listeners who know what I'm going to say. But I feel like there should be a way for people to do it in a way that's not terrible. Other crops manage to do it. So, I mean, there seem to be companies that are not, you know, eminently mendacious and evil about it and respect the person.
I think it's just profit motivated. I don't think it's an evil thing when it comes down to the big corporations who are implementing it at the highest scale. And I think a lot of people even misinterpret what CRISPR is and how it works, and that it was actually kind of discovered as early as the 80s and not implemented really until the 2010s in the way that we see it now. But it was kind of found in nature and some of the
Yeah, it's for
replications of
those who don't
things.
know, it's bacteria. I don't mean to interrupt, but yeah, this is like we didn't like figure this out. Like we saw bacteria do it, and that's what CRISPR is. Anyway.
It's replicating a part of nature and then applying it with kind of a more fine-tuned tool. And it's been able to be implemented in a handful of different ways now since we've discovered how it works and using it to manipulate everything from bacteria to human biology. So it's interesting. And we really only have about a decade of research. So we've
It
seen some
basically
implementation.
replaces a snippet of the DNA of a thing, right?
Well, there's different
Yeah,
ways that it
SNP.
can be applied, but yeah, that is
Oral
one of the
candy. Yeah.
ways that it is. There's a whole bunch of different functions and how it can act, but
But and that's
essentially,
the reason why it's also a little different is it's really cheap in comparison to genetically modifying in other ways, from what I understand anyway.
it really does depend because you have to have knowledgeable researchers with high tech
Right.
equipment. The reason you're only seeing it at like Monsanto or other large biotech and ag is because it's not something that the home grower is going to necessarily have access to. Like one of the heirs to the Coke bottling fortune in Greece used a mutagen to start growing hemp in the Bahamas and other Caribbean areas because hemp was growing really hot, like higher than zero point 0.3 THC. But he uh, radiated or did some sort of mutagenic breeding to a batch of cannabis crops and then found one that had zero point 0.0 THC. And then he was able to grow that one even on the equator with zero point 0.0 THC as hemp. And he has made Swiss X CBD from using that mutagenic breeding technique. So people are currently consuming CBD if they use Swiss X from a mutagenic breeding process. So that's already in the cannabis space, currently worldwide kind of available. And you may or may not even know that it came from that process because some people can buy their product and then put it into other product and things like that. So, and there's probably more than one person. I'm sure they're licensing out that plant technology or whatever to other companies to be able to grow hemp in places where otherwise it would be much hotter THC wise. Chefo MJ asked an interesting question, and I hadn't actually heard of this, but they asked, are cannabis plants like an orchid having the ability to mimic? And I looked into it a little bit, and orchids can sort of mimic to attract pollinators and things like that. And I think because cannabis is predominantly a wind pollinated plant, not really driven by birds or insects or other things, not to say that it can't be pollinated by bees and birds and whatever, but it doesn't require that like some other plants would. So I don't necessarily think I looked into it a little bit, but whenever I typed in cannabis mimic, all I was finding is like other drugs that mimic cannabis or the effects of cannabis being mimicked by other things and a whole lot of really other, articles. I've seen things about, terpenes that they put off in response to like being attacked by bugs and things like that, but I haven't seen them visually changing their appearance to attract pollinators or anything like that. But I'd be curious if Matthew or anybody else on the panel has thoughts on that question from Chef.
Not really. Although to be honest, like you were saying, I'm not really sure what was meant mimicking. Like, yeah, like orchids have this ability, but like it's like a it's like it's something they've evolved. They've co-evolved. There's like a co-evolved response. Like it's over a very long period of time. So I mean, presumably you would have to like breed that or something. If you wanted to do something even remotely like close to that. And I don't think. Yeah,
Yeah, it was just too short
I'm not
lived.
sure. Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense. Yeah, this is my first ever even hearing about. I'm not familiar with orchids, and so this is my first to hear anything like that. But I think it's just so different of a plant that I would say no. I would say canvas does
Orchids are a
not.
very unique plant, actually. They're very, very weird. Um, and they became very popular because of how the flowers look. But yeah, orchids are a very strange group of plants. When we think of all plants, they've got a lot of unique adaptations.
Shout out to the Ohio State University and
Why?
their
Why?
discovery
Why would you ever shout out to a house?
because they're making
It's-
orchid plants survive with a very simple trick. And it sounds like a fucking cannabis myth, but they're instead of ice flushing people that can't care for their orchids because often people are gifted them or buy them at the store and they're like expecting to, water it like a flower, right? They kill their fucking orchids so fast because they overwater them very often. They, I think it's like 3 ice cubes or something on the top of the soil. So that way the ice slowly melts and then is uptaken by, it's almost like a reverse sip strategy. But some botanist at Ohio State University discovered that by giving people that instruction, like of the 100 orchid growers, 50 did that, and then 50 did like their traditional, and like 49 out of 50 grew beautiful orchids with the ice method, and then of the other 50, it was like 5 kept the plant alive. So shout out to that guy, and I'm probably fudging the numbers a little bit because I don't have the paper right in front of me, but I do recall that being an interesting discovery come out of the Ohio State University.
You know what I was thinking?
Yeah.
Of all the plants I've seen, what would it possibly be mimicking? And yeah, I don't know. Maybe corn, kinda.
So I asked Grok what cannabis would mimic or can cannabis mimic like orchids, and it said, well, it can't visually unless it was bred, like kind of Matthew alluded to visually attract something. It says cannabis is wind pollinated, like I mentioned, but scent
Yeah.
mimicry, cannabis could mimic the scent of an actual
Oh, there
orchid
you go.
or other plants of cannabis around it. So in some regard, it could
Lavender.
use some sort of mimicking effect to attract a pollinator or maybe even defend itself from an attacker, like we've mentioned in the past how terpenes can work as a defense mechanism.
Well,
It's definitely
Chef
flower.
followed up. He says, I'll send you some pictures in my hypothesis. I found seeded plants to produce different colors I've never seen. That just makes sense because a seeded plant is going to be like hormonally changing differently than a non-seeded plant. And so to me, that just
Yeah.
in my head, it makes sense. Just the shifting of resources. You're going to see like the different weird fadings and things like fall colors probably. And I for sure saw, well, it's hard for me to say that I for sure saw different colors because when I seeded out my plants, I let those fuckers go like die in the soil, kind of way well past harvest time, so that
Gold and
they're gonna look
brown.
that yeah, they're gonna look like
Yeah.
that anyway. So but yeah, I get what he's saying, the different colors.
I do think if you've never grown a seeded plant, it's a different process than growing an unseeded plant. And the morphology and structure and life cycle of the plant is just different. And until you do it, you're going to look at the plant differently, I think. If you've only grown Sensi and then you eventually pollinate a plant, even if it's unintentionally, like from a herb or something.
Yeah, male plants get funky looking too when they go long and get all colorful and shit.
I've never had a male last longer than like 7 weeks in flower. They're usually dead by like week 6 or 5 or something. They throw their pollen and then they're just like,
Dude, I've had male plants like throw pollen for like fucking 5, 6 weeks straight. Just fucking what a mess. There's still pollen in that tent. Fucking ridiculous.
I do keep them in small pots. I never give them more than a gallon, and sometimes I go solo cup. So that's probably why, because I know how much fucking pollen even a solo cup plant will make, and it's plenty for my purposes most times. The 1 gallon male threw way too much fucking pollen. I'll tell you that. I did not use all of it, and the plant was like straight up cut, like it was smothered in pollen. I almost wonder if it was overdone, but I did get a shit ton of seeds, so hey, it worked out. But
See, that's what I had tons of seed. I just kick the tent is what I'd do is I'd go past and kick it and there'd just be puffs of fucking pollen everywhere. Seed person one asked me, did I smoke or sift the plants that like go line? No, those were seeded plants that I let them get so dead and done and dry that when I did harvest them, I put them in a trim bin and just literally with gloves on, just crushed them into dust to get the seeds, separate the chaff. So no, I didn't smoke any of that.
I smoked that shit.
It was covered in pollen too. It was just fucking coked. It was just it looked like that's what it looked like. Just like powder everywhere in that fucking it was insane. Because I had two males and two females, and they got, big and tall over the females like they do. And just they were beasts. And yeah, they just dumped and dumped and dumped and dumped.
Yeah, if you've never seen a large male pollen or cannabis plant throw pollen, it's a sight to fucking hold. They throw plentiful amounts, and that's why it can be wind pollinated. They don't even really have to be that close to each other. I've heard cases of plants in Spain pollinating plants over the fucking waterway overnight with a strong wind. Uh, I think it's over to Nepal or something. I'm fucking up on my geography right now, a little stoned.
Like
It's
even like yeah, you definitely there's like a lot of plants where you can get pollen or even like spores like coming in from like yeah, like from Europe to like North Africa, for example, or further. But like, like that's like a big flyway for like birds and other sorts of things. For the CRISPR question though that we had before, I'll ask one question just to bring it up again because it's just a functional question. I'm curious what chat thinks about this because I've talked about it before. If somebody came up, and let's say it wasn't CRISPR, let's say that it was just through a mutation and nobody did anything, to cause it, or they were just breeding in it and it happened to be the case that it lacked a gene instead of having a new allele or whatever. Um, so it gives the plant total resistance to like powdery mildew, but also it can't interact with mycorrhizae. Would you buy that plant? Would you use that plant? Because
Let's
of course it'll depend on where you are.
go. 100
Yeah.
million%. I would sell out to all the commercial facilities. Yes, absolutely.
Or
100%. Because they're just hitting it with salts anyway. So you're not going to get a huge benefit from mycorrhizae. And a lot of them aren't using it other than at the maybe very first transplant. So I would say, yeah, if I had a plant that I could go on and say absolute resistance, guys. Oh, all day long. I would retire. I would share with you, Matthew. We would both retire. How about that?
I'm down. Yeah, right. Like I feel like that's an example where we've seen this in other crops and it gives like really robust resistance because the powdery mildew needs that gene because that gene causes the cell to react to its presence in a reliable way, and that makes the infection possible. But when that gene is not there, that process doesn't happen. But it's also how the cell reacts to like the tendrils of hyphae in the roots too. So there's a take and give when it comes to that.
Matthew, does botrytis, you know, get its hold the same way?
No, I mean somewhat. It doesn't have to.
Okay.
It's a systemic pathogen rather than for powdery mildew that just stays on the surface of the leaf. But botrytis it can infect like in that way. But what it does is it can it secretes a lot of compounds and proteins and things that like basically cut off the like a few cells in an area from like the other ones from like being able to signal so that when it does infect the plant cells and then rapidly basically it produces some other commands that tell the cell to destroy itself, then they don't send the signals to the other cells. So that allows it, once it gets that foot in the door, then it becomes a lot easier to go through. And then it starts to necrotize the leaves or the bud. It depends on where it comes in from. And it can also be passed from parent to offspring. So that's the other
Ooh.
funny, funky fact.
All right.
So to
Is
follow up Spartan's little hypothetical where Matthew asked if he could have the plant that was, you know, resistant but didn't have access to mycorrhizae and the other side effects, etc. If one were to find that special plant, how would one actually retire off of it? Because I think we would ultimately have to like go through like a patent process or a licensing process or some sort of process where we would own it, or even if we started selling cuts, then it's out there, right? So second you sell one cut to
Ah,
one commercial facility.
I
I'll
think he
make
means
it.
like colloquially, he'd be like, here's these plants and here's
I
a
would
million
be no,
dollars.
I
I don't
mean
know.
like I would
I
get I
get
get
what you
with I talk to my boys out at Humboldt and be like, let's make this triploid. We're gonna feminize seed these fuckers and we're gonna be selling these out. Or we'll do tissue culture seeds. That'd be cooler. I'll send them all out to
With your
everybody.
Johnny Appleseed, and you get the gene, and then you like open pollinate, go to all the open pollinations, be like, here's your powdery mildew resistance to the people. No, I'm
And
kidding.
that's yeah, that's beautiful. I love it.
But you're right, because there's prior art rules, right? That's what you're alluding to, Jack.
It's just hard to even prove that what you have, even if it is unique and special, is yours, unique and
Yeah,
special,
but
and that
if
you
you
didn't.
have it in this industry, if you have it for real, yeah, it'll the news will travel before as faster than driving
Let's be
across the
real. In
country.
this industry, if you just say it loud enough and proud enough,
People will hold you up and laugh at you
people
until
will
you prove
just.
it.
Yeah, that's true.
Or
I wish it
or you
was
could
more
just
true, though.
fill the
Yeah.
You'd make a lot of sales just from the, you know, salesman tactic of saying you have something that people want. Enough people are going to buy it and try and find out.
probably make a lot of
Unfortunately,
sales just growing it because then you wouldn't have to worry about powdered
Somebody
mildew
like gets a different
unless
fungus entirely and goes like, "See, he was wrong," and then suddenly stocks go down, even though it was true. Like,
it's
now
powdery
Matthew
mildew
but
resistant, but
I've
they
thought
get
about
some.
this before. Let's say I've thought about these
is,
possibilities.
is botrytis proof a thing and is it attached to a gene or they don't know?
I think it's
No, I
kind
don't
of
think
like a
so.
broad
It's
in to
super.
me. Maybe Matthew, maybe you can
uh,
tell me how wrong I am, but to me, it's always, and it's usually outdoors where I struggle with these things the most. I mean, it seems like PM is like an out, I call it like a kind of an outside thing. It sits on the outside of the leaf and it kind of attacks the leaves, and that's how it kind of gets in. But botrytis is you almost always something like I'll find a fucking little worm in there, or something went in there and died, and that's what caused the botrytis. It's not like something that attacked the inside of the plant and it just got bad. It's like 9 out of 10 times I always found like some culprit, something that fucking got into the bud, like, and caused where I could see that's where it started, that fungus or something. So it's almost like an
Yeah,
inside.
I mean, I think with the caveat being that like if you're more sheltered from the environment, then you got less spores coming in, all that stuff, right? Like we put that out, you know. Um, the thing is that I think an important aspect to understand, which is why that quantification we were talking about earlier for resistance is so important, is like you might bring in a few botrytis spores, let's say 100, but maybe like 70 out of those 100 are in some ways maligned. Maybe they have mutations that just cause them to be not effective, or maybe they are damaged in transit or whatever. Because that stuff happens. That's why like the male pollen for cannabis, they make so much of that pollen. And similarly, some of it's going to be of different quality, or it's going to get heated up by the UV, the sun, and other stuff happens like that. um, and I feel like also, like there's research that shows that like the chunkiness of your buds, right? Like how compressed the buds are, how big the buds are will also have an effect. So like maybe you'll have a few cells that like maybe die on the leaf tissue because it's just too humid, and like and like when you look at the bud you don't see it because it's like microscopic, but like that might be just enough of like a little weakness for like a sporling to exploit. So like there's all these kinds of things that happen. They found that the chunkier buds get more bud rot even if you have like the same conditions. So like that
I
that
believe
comes to
that
my mind
you can
too.
get these teeny
Yeah.
tiny, tiny little leaves that like hide underneath the nugs and get kind of squished, and then
Yeah.
like they die. And when you pull them out, you're like, ah, fuck, it's like yellow brown or even a little bit molded, and you're like, that hid from me and caused problems. But Spartan, I think I see the dogs walking in the background. I don't know if you guys have Michigan Bros Grow Show. You got about 11 minutes if you do,
Oh yeah,
till
that's
No,
then.
I'm
true.
So
good. I'm good. They don't. I think they called it off today, so I'm good. I'll just hang out. These dogs can
Oh
chill.
sweet.
for sure, we
But
got you for.
Despicable Dabs on the same vein, Matt. That they said, what's the signs of bud rot? Because it comes from the inside out, right? And it's a really good question because it is usually by the time you spot it, it's fucking pretty late, too far late. You're gonna lose that whole branch probably, or at least that fucking whole cola. But I usually can see it on the bud itself. Just looking at the bud, it's from on the sugar leaves, the little sugar leaves that grow out of the bud. I'll start if I see like any kind of browning towards the bud, and then the rest of the leaf looks totally beautiful. So it's like reverse what you normally would see. If you saw anything on the leaves like that, where it's close to the bud is where it's looking bad. That's almost always pull on that leaf and it'll probably come out
Yeah.
real easy, and then pull on that bud a little
Hmm.
bit, and it's like, oh.
I've been there. Yeah,
Yeah.
any miscoloration on those little leaves sticking out of a nug, you go up in there, pull that one, and then it comes out like it was nothing. Then you squeeze, don't yeah, then you squeeze it, and then you like get the plastic bag, cover that bitch, cut out freaking, good 2, 3 nodes below that piece. I take that whole branch, just
Yeah,
get rid
take the
of
whole
it.
fucking branch and just say
Dude,
fuck it.
I've seen it happen, dude, where I was in the woods, I saw it. I'm like, I come back in a couple days and collect it all. Went back in a couple days. From what I saw, it was like took over 80%. And I was just like, yeah, no, I ain't even gonna fuck with this shit.
Yeah, even
So
yellowing.
it can take over quickly, man. It can if you don't do something.
When it gets over 80% of your plant like that, and even though that's a fresh plant, if you douse it with something like gasoline, it will still burn. I'm just saying.
Thank you.
Hey, compost's pretty fine too. Hot compost that shit. I think it can't survive at a certain temperature, and it's not even that
But
high.
but yeah, so to answer that question really briefly, I do have a huge presentation on the Future Canvas project and also on my YouTube channel, Zenthanol, if you're curious with that. Um, but basically, long story short, they have a bunch of these things we call effectors, so proteins and toxin compounds and all kinds of stuff. And what makes them super problematic and why I answered to Tao that like I don't know if I would say that like there's such thing as like a really good resistance because Botrytis cinerea is kind of an odd black sheep in the Botrytis group because all the other Botrytises are pretty specialized. They don't really go after a bunch of plants, but this one goes after tons, huge megapests, hundreds and hundreds of plants, very, very different from each other, very different physiologies, still isn't really abated. That implies and tells us, and we've seen in research that they make all these things that allow them to basically literally like nuke the cells, tell the cells to destroy themselves, and then they just sop up the resources and they continue. So a resistance to that would require like probably I mean, this is super speculative. I imagine that I know for a fact efforts like these at higher echelons than I understand are trying to do this and are failing. And I believe it's because it's such a sort of multiplex problem. There's all these things that they can turn on or turn off.
So
They
if
could
people
even
struggle
change how
with
the
this,
genes express.
It's
if
like
people
curing plant
struggle with this
cancer.
outdoor or something, I think just a quick takeaway, or at least old Spartan's trick, is BT Bacillus thuringiensis K, which I don't know the last part of it. Uh, that's to kill the little caterpillars so those little fuckers don't get near your damn buds. Because those are the biggest culprits that I would see. Try not to plant underneath a tree because they fall out of the fucking trees. That's where they're coming from. And there was one more thing. Oh, top your plants. Top your plants a little bit and break up those big fucking colors. You don't have to grow a Christmas tree outdoors. And plus it's cool to have them a little shorter anyway. It gives you a little bit more stealth. And those are some quick things that you can do as a grower to try to get you ahead of the curve. I'm not saying it's foolproof by any means, but it's definitely going to help.
Yeah, I'd say top like crazy. Get a bunch of smaller buds that don't rot versus a few big ones that do. And in terms of the botrytis, I think everything from like strawberries to cannabis and a whole lot in between, like Matthew said, hundreds of different things. One of the things I'm seeing is I think it's UVB exposure for just a few minutes is able to knock down or kill off a lot of botrytis, but you have to know that you have it, and you also have to, implement it the proper way. And even then, I don't think that people are going to want to smoke cannabis that had formerly botrytis, even if you kill the stuff that's actively on there. There's still sort of a potential mycotoxin risk, if I understand correctly from Matthew and I's previous
Yeah, that's
What are you,
right.
discussions.
what are
And
you
other
talking
stuff
about?
too.
People grow or people buy fucking dispo weed all the time, man.
Yeah, people, no, no, you're right. People do not typically know this, but some people do. Some people think about this. We do have to get out of our own bubble, I guess. But no, I know what you meant, Jack. You're right. I mean, people should consider that, like, but I have met people who don't consider that.
It's a risk to some people more than others, but it's also probably not like a 90% or even like, 80% thing. It's a fairly, hopefully small percent, but there are more and more people doing it improperly and causing themselves issues at scale, like just complete neglect and poor decision making at some of these commercial facilities, where they're walking themselves into problems that are easily avoided with better management. But not everybody is able to figure out and hire those good people or willing to pay for the people that'll actually do it right. So we still see a lot of issues pop up, and it'll keep people like Matthew and others in the field busy helping try and, grow rescue, grow repair, and hopefully set people up before they run into a lot of these issues because with proper management, you can avoid a lot of it. Not to say that anybody's going to have a perfect setup and never have any issues, but you can definitely cut back a significant amount of your issues by good management and grow practices that prevent, a lot of stuff from happening. Oversimplifying as we've got about 4 minutes left here, but we had another question, just quick one from APM, which says, "Sup guys, I have a grow question, but not in cannabis. Does pollen of fruit and vegetables become non-viable after getting wet, like cannabis pollen does, for example?" Any of you guys familiar with that?
I'm not familiar. I would
You'd have
expect
to
it
ask
to be
Google
true,
on
but I
that
don't
one.
know for sure.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't know.
I don't know either.
But I would, you know what, I'm gonna say I would think so because the pollen saving protocol that I adopted or would I really don't save it, to be honest. I only did it like 2 or 3 times because, like I say, I like that fresh skin on skin sex. So I like them having live plants. So, but anyway, uh, yeah, it was
Wait a
from
minute,
I
your
don't
plants
even
have skin?
well, kind of.
No, I'm-
Anyway, the yeah, actually, I'll go find it. I know I have it in PDF somewhere, but it was like this big long how to store and save and mail pollen even from like some other plant life form, where basically you want to keep it dry to make it stay alive, keep it dry, and yeah.
I think if it's wind pollinated, then it has to be dry. But I think that there's certain pollen that can actually actively work while it's wet from just a small amount of research I'm
Oh
doing on
yeah.
Google.
Yeah, I think just realized I didn't hear the part of this question. But yeah, I saw it in the chat. I think a lot of pollen does get like um it does get messed up basically by getting wet, but not all pollen. That's definitely true. I think also like because it's like contamination, and also like for the pollen that is wind pollinated, maybe it's a little bit more robust, or maybe it's more likely to survive, being not sheltered in some way. But I think the other issue is that pollen that gets wet is unlikely to like, get free of that. So I think that's also a big part of it too.
Yeah, it
Maybe
doesn't
it
want to
does
move as
intrinsically
well.
cause the
It
problem. Yeah,
it
there's like too
sits on
much
the floor
moisture.
where it's wet versus blowing
Yeah,
across,
exactly.
miles.
100%.
Well, I think that about wraps it up for us this evening. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it first to Spartan Grown for any final thoughts and shout outs.
Oh, I just shout out to chat. I saw a couple faces that I haven't seen for a while. Raptor Grow, that's the one that stood out to me. It's good to see you, buddy. A lot of I don't want to. Now I'm gonna feel like I'm leaving people out by not shouting out the whole chat. So I'm shouting out the whole chat right now. I'm not leaving anybody out. And these shows kind of highlight the chat where we just answer the questions from those are my favorite. That or when they come on and show their grows. I really love that too. So shout out to you guys watching the show who continue to watch the show all these years doing the show. Still same faces out there and some new ones out there too. I love it. And everybody listening along. Other than that, much love and keep growing.
Thanks for joining us as always, Spartan. And one note I didn't mention earlier with the whole pollen thing that does get brought up sometimes is other cannabis plants can't be pollinated by like a tomato plant or even like hops. It could be pollinated by hemp, would be the exception. I think a lot of people think of them as separate things. That would be the one thing. Hemp will pollinate your cannabis. They're both cannabis, though, at the end of the day. And I don't think the other Cannabaceae can possibly do it. And I know all the other plants, like strawberries or bananas or whatever, none of that stuff is going to impact. I've seen that question a lot of times whenever any pollination stuff comes up. So you really only have to worry about cannabis or hemp, and all the other things are going to not really impact you. So with that said, next up, we've got Matthew Gates.
Yeah, good chat. I have a lot of things to talk about for people who are interested in knowing more. I will be trying to head more to Arizona, maybe sometime in the future. I'll be up in Adelanto next week for there's the Gravity Cannabis event that's coming up. So you check it out there. And I will hopefully be having a Festapalooza sometime in 2025, maybe January, February, up in Arizona at the High Lounge. So if you're in that area, you can check me out there. And I'll be at Austin, Texas for the PhotoX conference that's provided by Fluence. But I'll be talking about IPM technology and some of the new ways that people are, going about pest management. So that'll include microbes, but also include things like those drones that I see that, destroy moths with their propellers. So cool stuff like that if you're interested.
What about UVC lights? Very good one.
That's a great example. Yeah.
One of many tools in the tool belt. I love IPM. Matthew, you'd be really interested to meet somebody I met today. They're out like clearing invasive weeds and things in their local habitat around here. So they have a similar eye for invasive species, whether plant or animal, and making sure that they're taken out or properly reported. So it's cool to see that some people really care about the local environment like that and take it into their own hands sometimes. And shout out to those people and yourself who have a keen eye for knowing what's supposed to be there and what's not. So once Matthew let me know that my wife identified a frog that was not supposed to be here. So I had to report that to the local wildlife and make sure it got taken care of.
Oh
But
yeah, I remember that.
Oh, Jack, you snitched on the frogs,
I snitched him
man.
You're
out,
a
dude.
frog narker. That's
Oh,
true.
Narked on that fucking
bro.
frog. Dude, they're
You're gonna be
fucking, they're real
forever
bad. They're
plagued
real,
now.
real bad for the local. I like that. I prefer the other local San
Are they?
Diegans over that frog.
Just be a
Okay.
Fuck
G
that
and
frog.
just fucking catch him and throw him in the pond and let the fish eat him. But damn.
I'm from
Let
Ohio,
the
bro. We
fish
eat
eat them.
frog
Yeah.
legs. People go
Give
gigging.
them yeah, eat them.
You're not
All right,
supposed to,
now
but
you got
people would
you
hit them with a
got.
flashlight, go grab them, and fucking they're eating.
I'm not that. I've never been that hungry. I've had
It's
had
decent
frog
eating. I had it at a
legs.
good restaurant one time, real like high end fucking fancy place. They had frog legs. That was the first time I had them, but I had them many times after, and
Have
it's
you ever
pretty
seen them
decent. It's like chewier
prepared?
chicken.
Have you ever seen them prepared? How they like kick in the frying pan?
Oh, my buddy, dude, bro, I've seen him fucking catch one and cook it up on the side of the fucking. I'm from the suburbs, I guess, but
From the South,
areas in
bro. From
Ohio
the South.
where there's people that live in
The
the
South of
country and
Ohio.
people that live in the city. You
Dude,
get a little bit of
them
everything.
Duck Dynasty dudes love on them frog looking
Uh,
catching thing. I saw that episode.
It's a delicacy,
Listen,
well
you
loved
know
by
what the
many. I'm a
most
crawfish man, so
Hey,
I'm
no
not one to
judge.
judge.
I'm just not going to eat with you. That's all.
All good, brother. Everything
I
ain't for
like it.
everyone. But Tao,
Right, man.
final thoughts and shout outs from our last and certainly not least panelist, the American one.
yeah, let me explain to you all. The reality is the most invasive creatures that landed on this American soil was these white men, these colonialists from England. No, I'm joking. There was probably some
Talk about
Phoenicians
thrips.
before us. But
Yeah,
anyway,
some thrips. Yeah, from the Dutchland, right? Flower thrips.
yeah. And we might even be, not from this planet. Someone could have just dumped us off here. Anyway,
I just saw the end of Discovery, Star Trek Discovery, and that's apparently the spoiler alert. That's what they went with.
I know. Who
I'm a little
knew?
disappointed to be honest. A little bit lazy, a little rushed. Rushed.
Yeah, there's nothing original anymore. Anyway, I'm the American one on the YouTube and the American one underscore with underscore Akeens over on IG. Most of you know me and see me around. It's always good to be here, Jack. Always thanks for hosting. It's good to see Matthew, Spartan, and shout out to all those who are MIA. And yeah, good to see everyone in chat. Peace out. Have a great week. We'll catch you next time around.
I'd argue there is originals and they're right here. The American one is one of them. If you want some original, unique, awesome shit, check out amyaces.com. Girly Amy Aces is some fucking fire. I do agree that there's a lot of shit that's just remade, old stuff, recycled into the new, and they're trying to, make a little money off of what worked in the last generation. And oftentimes it works. We're suckers for nostalgia, and creative ideas are difficult to come by that the general public will accept and enjoy. And so people, I think, go to that old favorite over and over. So there's ups and downs to it. I like to see sometimes the remakes, like I liked Rocky 4. Fucking who would have fucking thought, man? Rocky 4 was fire, bro. I'll stand up for Rocky 4. That is a one of the examples of the sequel, I think, being potentially better than the first. And that might be overstepping my bounds, but shout out to Stallone. He's made some fire movies over the years, and you may not love them, but man, some really interesting, time-changing dynamics that went on in a lot of his stuff. Going way off topic. I'm at Jack Greenstock. You can find me on Instagram there. I basically answer DMs and just, comment on people's posts over there. I'm not posting much anymore because they will ban your shit for cannabis, which fuck that. Jack_Greenstock is my backup account in case they ban me. But that's where I post this very show on X, which was formerly known as Twitter. So x.com, Jack_Greenstock. You can find this very show tomorrow at some point when I get it uploaded, and on all the podcast platforms. Thank you all for listening. I really enjoy, like Spartan said, answering questions. I do apologize. I wrote open panel and I just got so caught up in the conversation and topics and other things. I kind of made it a combo of Q&A plus a little bit of a topic, because sometimes when we do Q&A, only so many roll in, and sometimes I miss them. So I apologize if we do miss some of them. We'll maybe do a lightning round and then have people come on, actually do open panel sometime soon, and also look forward to maybe some science. With that said, we are like 7 minutes over time. We're not cutting into Michigan Bros Grow Show, but don't want to keep you all any longer than we already have. Peace and love, y'all. Catch you next week. Keep on growing.
Grow a lot.